Thanks.
Yeah. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 20th Clearwater City Council meeting. I'm going to introduce everyone here on the dais. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian Ongst, and somehow after 20 years I ended up back in this seat, so I appreciate this council again for putting me here to serve out the remainder of Frank Hibbert's term. To my far right is our city manager, Jennifer Poirier.
Good evening.
Next to her is council member Kathleen Beckman.
Good evening.
Next to me is our vice mayor, Mark Bunker. Good evening. On my left is council member Lena Teixeira.
Good evening.
Next to her is council member David Albritton.
Good evening.
Next to him is our city attorney, David Margolis.
Good evening.
And I want to give a special shout out to Rosemary Call, who is her birthday tonight. So thank you. Welcome. Happy birthday. Anyone that wishes to address the council, please complete a comment card. Comment cards are located by the clerk seated to the right of the dais. When called upon to speak, please hand your card to the clerk. At this time, I'd like to call forward Reverend Pat Harney from the Church of Scientology to give the invocation, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you very much. Let us pray. May the author of the universe enable all men to reach an understanding of their spiritual nature. May awareness and understanding of life expand so that all may come to know the author of the universe. And may others also reach this understanding, which brings total freedom. At this time, we think of those whose liberty is threatened, of those who've suffered imprisonment for their beliefs, of those who are enslaved or martyred, and for all those who are brutalized, trapped, or attacked. We pray that human rights will be preserved so that all people may believe and worship freely, so that freedom will once again be seen in our land. Freedom from war and poverty and want. Freedom to be, freedom to do, and freedom to have. Freedom to use and understand man's potential. A potential that is God-given and God-like. And freedom to achieve that understanding and awareness that is total freedom. May God let it be so. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend Harney. Okay, we have some special recognitions and awards to begin this evening. First, we're going to do three service awards, a 5-year employee award for Michael Fuina from Legal. Please come forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Mike. Congratulations, Michael. The Employee of the Month for April 2023, Samantha Moulet of Office of Innovation. Please come forward.
In the words of a citizen, I am writing to recognize one of your city employees for going above and beyond for my family. Last Thursday, I spoke with Samantha in your neighborhood's department about a previous art contest that my daughter had won. A few months ago, the city posted a contest for kids to create artwork about recycling and keeping our beaches clean. The winner's artwork would be showcased on a magnet on one of the city's new wrap trucks. When I spoke with Samantha last Thursday, I mentioned that my daughter's birthday was Monday and that we were hoping to find a way to see her artwork on one of the trucks. Samantha went out of her way to turn this request into a huge surprise for my daughter on her special day. Samantha arranged for the truck to be at the Clearwater Marine Aquarium on Monday morning, where we were heading for the day. She also worked with the aquarium to try and make our visit there even more special with some extra perks. My daughter was so surprised and excited to see the truck with her artwork. Samantha did all of this basically in one business day, and we truly appreciate the work she put in to make our daughter feel special on her birthday. Sincerely, Pete Tanner. Thank you, Samantha, for creating an experience for one of our citizens and for doing an exceptional job of showing how bright and beautiful Clearwater truly is.
Congratulations.
Good job. Congratulations to Samantha. Now I'd like to call forward for the team of the quarter, Fire Submerged Vehicle Tram from the Fire Department, Chief Pettingill. Will you please come forward?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
For those that don't know me, my name is Marvin Pettingill. I'm the Deputy Chief of Clearwater Fire and Rescue. And next to me is Division Chief Javon Graham, our Emergency Manager. On behalf of Fire Chief Ellers, who cannot be here tonight, myself and Chief Graham would like to introduce our following members for the bi-monthly Team Award and Clearwater Fire and Rescue Unit Citation. Lieutenant Jennifer Pauley, Lieutenant Ben McBride, Driver Operator Adam Mittler, Firemedic Gabriel David Serpa, Firemedic Mason Marty, Firemedic Logan Campbell, Driver Operator David Marlowe, Firemedic Stephanie Niskowski, Firemedic Matthew Mager, and District Commander Brian Schonborn. Also, Lieutenant Steve Peters, Driver Operator James Griffin, Firemedic Chris Collins, Firemedic Nina Borders, Firemedic Jacob Williams, Lieutenant Bob Keene, Lieutenant Wade Bishop, Firemedic Logan Cruz, Lieutenant Casey Matz, Driver Operator Freddie Ortiz, and Firemedic Austin Ryan. We also have Lieutenant LR Robbie Weiner and District Commander Alex Monte.
Units were dispatched to a report of a vehicle driven into a pond and sinking with a driver trapped within. Upon arrival, a vehicle was seen approximately 25 to 35 feet from the edge of the water with just the rear hatch window showing. Engine 48 and Rescue 48, crews of Lieutenant Ben McBride, Firemedic Nuzowski, Firemedic Marty immediately swam out to the car. The rear window was broken to gain access as the occupant was attempting to escape but was trapped. Shortly thereafter, the vehicle completely submerged with the victim still grasping Lieutenant McBride's arm. The victim became unresponsive and was still trapped. Units repeatedly drove down to remove the woman with a vehicle 8 to 10 feet deep. Squad 51, with Lieutenant Bishop and Firemedic Cruz, assisted with the rescue, and eventually the victim was removed through the rear door window on the driver's side, which was also taken out with a spring-loaded window punch. Multiple attempts to free her were made by all who entered the water, as each was holding their breath. The victim was removed and brought to shore in full cardiac arrest. Members from Engine 48, Rescue 48, Squad 51, LR 45, and SS 238, including those who were wet and injured having just removed her, worked the code, and then she was transported to Countryside Light Hospital. Lieutenant Peters from Engine 49 donned a rapid diver unit and finished the search of a vehicle, ensuring no other victims. Reports of the victim was stable and recovering at Countryside Hospital. The time from on the scene to victim being transported was 12 minutes, which is absolutely amazing. Thanks to this team's quick response and continued actions, they saved her life. Thank you for your dedication to helping our citizens.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Outstanding.
Thank you. 12 minutes is mighty impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good job. Hey, Ron. How you doing?
That's just outstanding, and congratulations again to the team. A life saved and training came into play, and congratulations. Great job.
Thank you. And now, Mayor and Council, in addition to the unit citations, we'd like to recognize 5 members of the department for their individual heroic actions with the Life-Saving Medal Award. And those recipients are Lieutenant Ben McBride, Fireman Stephanie Niskowski, Paramedic Mason Marty, Lieutenant Wade Bishop, and Paramedic Logan Cruz. Congratulations.
That's right. Good job. Thank you.
Careful, a little bump there. Great job.
Good job. Thank you. Great job.
Good job. And Mayor, Council, we have a couple more here, and we'll be done, I promise you. And this is a surprise to a couple of our members here now, so we're going to go ahead and let everybody know who the Firefighter of the Year and Paramedic of the Year are. We'll begin with the Paramedic of the Year for 2022, and that would be Stephanie Niskowski. So Stephanie, want to do?
Couple more rounds will be here. You're going to clear room on your trophy case. Congratulations.
Time's a charm.
Great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so Stephanie has had many critical and stressful calls to which she has performed at a level of seasoned paramedic. Paramedic Niskowski handled these calls with compassion, calmness, and let her clinical experience guide her to the best possible outcome of these patients. Two significant incidents that should be highlighted are, number one, she was an integral part, of the November 12, 2022 rescue of a woman from a submerged vehicle incident. Not only did she assist with the actual water rescue, but she then was also part of the medical crew that worked on a patient until return of spontaneous circulation was achieved. The second one, on 3/10/2021, Station 48 had an unusual walk-in to the station for a 12-year-old girl that was placed in foster care group home after losing both her parents last year. The foster group home had become an unsafe environment for this child that made her decide to run away. An elder female citizen brought the girl to the fire station, who was in fact a runaway and living a few streets away from Fire Station 48 behind a dumpster with a chair, blanket, umbrella, and a pocket knife. Fireman Niskowski was very compassionate and built a good rapport with the girl, keeping this unusual walk-in under control and moving in the right direction. She notified CPD right away, worked with the caseworker, shelter services, and the Florida Department of Children and Family Services. Additionally, she kept the child's needs first, checking to make sure he wasn't hurt, and even made sure to check, when the last time she had something to eat or drink. Even this is part of the Clearwater Fire Rescue Safe Place Procedures Program, which assists a youth in a crisis situation. Fireman Niskowski handled this situation professionally and knowledgeable. Stephanie, it is because of your selfless actions you are able to make a difference in someone's life in our community, and therefore you are being presented with the Paramedic of the Year 2022 award. and Council, we have one more. We're going to talk about the Firefighter of the Year for 2022, and that will be Fire Lieutenant Wade Bishop.
That's what she's getting.
Fire Lieutenant Bishop was an integral part of the November 12, 2022 rescue of a woman from a submerged vehicle incident. Even after firefighters broke the rear window, clearing debris, and made several dive attempts, they were unsuccessful in bringing the driver to the surface. Lieutenant Bishop joined the rescue operation with some knowledge of where the last known location of the victim was and the best way to access her. On Lieutenant Bishop's second dive attempt, he was able to pull the victim out. Somehow I lost my place. Pull the victim out. Lieutenant Bishop's underwater dives to locate and remove the victim was a huge factor in her survivability. Wade, it is because of your selfless actions you were able to help save a life and therefore being presented with the Firefighter of the Year 2022 award. Congratulations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chief. And again, outstanding work. Very well-deserved honors. Okay. Now we have a proclamation for National Library Week. If I can have Jen Obermaier, Library Director, please come forward.
Good evening.
Evening.
Jennifer Obermaier, Library Director.
Whereas libraries provide the opportunity for everyone to pursue their passions and engage in lifelong learning, allowing them to live their best life. And whereas libraries have long served as trusted institutions for all members of the community, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or socioeconomic status. Whereas libraries strive to develop and maintain programs and collections that are as diverse as the populations they serve and ensure equity of access for all. Whereas libraries play a critical role in the economic vitality of communities by providing internet and technology access, literacy skills, and support for job seekers, small businesses, and entrepreneurs. And whereas libraries are cornerstones of democracy, promoting the free exchange of information and ideas for all. Now therefore, I, Brian J. Young Sr., Mayor of the City of Clearwater, Florida, on behalf of the Clearwater City Council, do hereby proclaim April 23rd through the 29th, 2023 to be National Library Week. During this week, I encourage all Clearwater residents to visit their library to explore the wealth of resources that are available.
Thank you so much. So next week is National Library Week, and it's really our opportunity to celebrate our library system and its positive impact on our Clearwater community. In addition, we also celebrate our library staff members whose hard work and dedication allow us to provide the wonderful services and programs that we do. So thank you so much. And in a moment, you're going to hear about a special early literacy program that we offer. We have some special guests, and we have our youth librarians here. You'll hear them in a moment. But I want to thank City Management, City Council, and Mayor for your continued support for our library system. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten Challenge, and if I could have Mercedes Bleattler, the lead librarian for youth, please come forward.
Hi, thank you.
Good evening.
Welcome. I would like to bring also our youth librarians, Cassidy Bonovich from the Countryside Branch, Wendy Pianto from the East Branch, and where is Valerie? Valerie Patrick. She's back there from our main branch. So we're here tonight to celebrate our young readers who have completed their 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten Challenge. This is a challenge that employs our Beanstack application. It's a software program that we use for our summer reading and for our various different reading programs. It helps book lovers record their reading efforts, and it offers rewards at various stages on their journey to 1,000 books. So when a child first signs up, they're given a free picture book or a board book to get them started. And then the parent or caregiver can just look up a title on the app and tap it, and the book comes in and they tap that they've read it, and it'll send them alerts telling them, you know, you're ready to come pick up your prize at this interval, or congratulations, you've reached this level. The challenge is for children birth to 5 years old, and it's a really important step in their early literacy development. At this stage, the parents and the caregivers are the primary teachers in the child's life. So, you know, it just helps them, encourages them to read on a regular basis with their child. And reading regularly brings closeness because they're doing it with their favorite adult. You know, their bedtime story and their, you know, story that they want to hear every day. That they, you know, through the closeness of that, they start to equate reading with pleasure. And that's like one of the most important parts to developing a reader. So a fun fact, if you read one bedtime story every night for 3 years, you will read 1,095 books. If you read 3 books every day, you will read 1,095 books in a year. So our super readers here tonight, they're the ones that have read 3 books or more a day. So we're really proud of them. And yes, you can read the same book over a few times, because anyone who has ever had a toddler knows that they develop a liking for a particular book. And once again, it's about the pleasure of reading is really what we're trying to reinforce. And we want to just get across the message that it's never too early to start reading to your child. Often we hear at the library, you know, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to bring them to story time, you know, when they started school or whenever, and we're like, no, we'll bring them as soon as they're born. We have story times for babies from infants up because they start learning the rhythm of language, and, you know, when they sing the songs, it breaks down the words into the, you know, the components. So all that helps them later when they're trying to read independently. And so we want to really celebrate the families, the children and the families, because, you know, they were the ones that supported them in this process. So we're going to bring them up and give them their certificates. I don't know how you want to do this, because I don't think they're going to be able to shake your hand. Maybe just have them line up or something? I don't know. Okay, so our first winner is Grace Ng. There's Grace.
Oh, Grace.
Can you tell us how many books you've read on your sticker? Exactly.
1,146.
And our next recipient is Michael Mata. Michael. And how many books did you read? 1,000.
Next we have Madison Rogers. Madison's a little shy. Can you tell us how many books you read? Okay.
And we have Nico Sellers. There you are, Nico.
Reddington Stickles. You are our top reader at 1,386. We have one last Chairperson Monica, who is not able to attend tonight, but we're going to give her her certificate. And I should have mentioned that during the summer, before the children had completed their 1,000, Nico was our top reader at the time, and Michael was our top reader at the time, and he was invited to come throw out the opening pitch at a Clearwater Thresher game, which was very exciting.
Congratulations all. It's a great program. Keep it up. Thank you. Okay, now if we could have Al Patton's Donate Life Month proclamation, the LifeLink Foundation volunteer. Please come forward. Whereas one of the most meaningful gifts that a human being can bestow upon another is the gift of life, and whereas over 103,000 men, women, and children are currently on the national waiting list for organ transplantation, of which nearly 4,900 reside in the state of Florida. And whereas 42,887, a record number of transplants, occurred in the calendar year of 2022, thanks to the generosity of 21,370 deceased and living donors, of which 3,064 transplant patients and 12,030 deceased and living donors were from Florida. And whereas more than 12 million Floridians have already registered their decision to give the gift of life through organ and tissue donation at www.donatelifeflorida.org or on their driver's license. And whereas LifeLink of Florida, the nonprofit organization dedicated to the recovery of organs and tissue for transplantation therapy in Florida, with a mission to honor donors and save lives through organ and tissue donation. Now, therefore, I, Brian Ungst Sr., Mayor of the City of Clearwater, Florida, on behalf of the Clearwater City Council, do hereby proclaim April 2023 to be Donate Life Month in the City of Clearwater, and encourage all residents to consider giving the gift of life through organ donation by registering via www.donatelifeflorida.org or when renewing your driver's license or state identification card.
Yes, sir. I'm Al Payton. I am a 10-year-plus recipient of a liver transplant. In 2010, I was diagnosed with liver cancer. After several months of scans and lab work, it was identified that I needed a transplant and was placed on the waiting list. I actually received my transplant at Scripps Green Hospital in San Diego, California, where I was living at the time. Without it, I would not have been able to attend my 50th wedding anniversary, see 5 grandchildren graduate from high school, 2 from college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Things that we many times take for granted, but you can't take them for granted because you might not have a chance to experience those. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. I tell high school kids when I meet with them, I said, I know the hardest question you're going to have on your exam. And they look at me like, what? And I said, yeah. Do you want to be an organ donor? And some of them look at me like, what are you talking about? But it is a significant decision for these young people to make. You asked why we need so many registered donors. The other interesting statistic that doesn't get taught out very often is that only 1 of 3,000 registered donors will ever become an actual donor. It's because of the unique nature of the death that has to take place. It's a critical injury to the spinal or brain, and 2 doctors have to declare the person brain dead in order for them to become eligible to be a donor. And it's a tremendous process that you don't learn about till after it's all over. I've been fascinated by how quickly the organization like LifeLink and all the hospitals in the area can respond and get lives saved. So thank you very much for your community's recognition of this important milestone for us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you. You're my hero. I'd give you a lifesaver if I had one.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Payton. Okay, next we have a acknowledgement of the Homeless Leadership Alliance of Pinellas Team. If Dr. Monica Ailsnick could please come forward, and I'm going to read this acknowledgement. And your team, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
This certificate of acknowledgement is presented to the Homeless Leadership Alliance of Pinellas Team. It is with great appreciation I and the Clearwater City Council acknowledge the Homeless Leadership Alliance of Pinellas Team's effort to prevent, divert, and end homelessness in Pinellas County. We especially wish to acknowledge the compassionate care provided to more than 90 families who were displaced due to the closing of Capri Mobile Home Park in January of 2023. The HLA team coordinated with providers, county and city, to support these Clearwater residents with temporary emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, and housing navigation to prevent them from becoming homeless. We ask all citizens of Clearwater to applaud the work of the HLA team, consisting of the following wonderful men and women: Dr. Monica Ailsnick, CEO; Olivia Barclay, Community Navigation Manager; David Atkins, the Landlord Liaison; Erica Raffraff, hopefully I said that correctly, Housing Specialist; Mario Rodriguez, Veteran Navigator; Lenny Colazzo, Veteran System Manager; and Than Van TV, Intake Specialist Team Leader; Alex Strider, Housing Stabilization Manager. Congratulations, and keep up the great work. We appreciate it very much.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I just want to take this moment to truly thank you. This amazing team that I am surrounded by, through the gracious financial support of this council, we're able to successfully house so many individuals who tonight are sleeping with roofs over their heads. We have children who have bedrooms. They're their own bedroom for the first time. We have families that have food in their homes, and they have stable roofs over their heads. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of this council and so many of the city workers, including Chuck Lane and his team. So thank you all, and we are always here to help and do what we can to alleviate this problem. And let's make homelessness a rare one-time event for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, you have no idea, sir. I really, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
And congratulations again to the HLA group. Outstanding work. We appreciate it. Now I'd like to call forward William Anderson, Stormwater Maintenance Division Supervisor from Public Works, for the Arbor Day Proclamation. Whereas trees increase the beauty of communities, increase the value of properties, enhance the economic vitality of businesses, and whereas trees reduce the erosion of precious topsoil by wind and water, help control heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas Arbor Day was started in 1872 as a special day to plant trees as well as support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands throughout our nation, especially our urban areas. And whereas the City of Clearwater continues to encourage residents to plant, maintain, and protect trees, now therefore I, Brian J. Unk Sr., Mayor of the City of Clearwater, Florida, on behalf of the Clearwater City Council, do hereby proclaim April 28th, 2023 to be Arbor Day in the City of Clearwater.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Next Saturday, April 29th, beginning 8 a.m., in recognition of Arbor Day, our Public Works Department, Urban Forestry Division will be giving away trees. Over 2,000 trees are expected to be given away starting at 8 a.m. at our Public Works Complex, 1650 North Arcturus Avenue, here in Clearwater, Florida.
Thank you, sir. Good job.
Good job.
Okay, moving on. Do we have approval of the minutes of the April 11th Special City Council meeting?
move to approve those minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Now, do we have approval of the March 27, 2023 special city council meeting?
I move we approve those minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, now it's time for citizens to be heard regarding items not on the agenda. Please fill out a comment card and pass them on to the clerk when you come up. Citizens to be heard.
Hi. I'm Ingrid Anderson. I was here last year about the tree removals at Harbortown condominiums. What I want you to appoint a volunteer from the Environmental Advisory Board to work with me to document the tree removals and any replacements at Harbortown. I want them to make findings and recommendations for the council, not the planning department. Why? Last year, Frank Hibbert said that 30 tree permits should be enforced at Harbortown. It didn't happen. Only 5 of the 50 removed trees were ordered to be replaced. Alan Crandall in City Trees says, I'm very concerned this is becoming arbitrary. Back in 2019, Bill Horn says, we spent enough time on this. My final thought is that I don't think Harbortown has been completely forthcoming. Why would he think that? One Harbortown board president said the trees are invading our lands. We don't need any more trees. Current board member says the trees at Harbortown, oaks, pines, palms, over 60 years old, don't belong here. No tree should be within 100 feet of a building. Lastly, Gina Clayton in planning. Final word. The city's position is that the 30 trees were removed. I consider that a throw my hands up in the air, get it over with response. I lived there for 35 years. I planted many trees and plants. I walked the property. I was on the landscape committee. I was president of the board. I donated thousands of dollars in trees and plants there. I would know this if there were 30 trees that appeared on the property. The constant refrain was, we don't have time for this. Well, let's prove what the facts are at Harbortown. And I will meet with someone from Environmental Advisory Board or someone they trust to get this done. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else for citizens to be heard on non-agenda items?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Patrick Raftery. I'm a 44-year resident of Clearwater. I reside in the countryside area. First, I'd like to welcome former Mayor Onks to your position on the council. Your experience, insight, and perspective from your previous service to the city, I'm sure will be welcomed by your fellow council members. Do not worry, there will be plenty to be addressed, and there'll be plenty of issues to be resolved amongst you. One of them just came up recently, which is a surprise to yourselves as well as the residents, was the Bluffs development revision that's being proposed. I'm sure that will undertake some study and some decisions to be made by the council with the ultimate goal of, are we going to continue moving forward or are we going to stop and take a step back? But I will leave those deliberations and decisions to yourself. One final thing I'd like to bring to your attention is the Baker-Tilly recommendation for a Clearwater strategic plan for FY 2023 through 2025. This is a 40-page document addressing 17 departments within the city. It's very light reading, actually, but not much character development, but there's certainly some grand objectives and goals that are set there for various departments. I've come to understand that this report may not be as enthusiastically received by members of the city operations as perhaps you and I will, but I do think there are elements within this proposal that do require to be looked at by the departments and the city manager and perhaps to be considered to be included in the budget that they will propose to yourselves to accomplish some of these things. So all I'm asking is that it be given proper consideration. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.
Anyone else on items not on the agenda?
evening, council members. My name is Chris. I'm here to express my support for the revised development plans presented by Gotham and the Zuzu Group. It's true.
Excuse me, sir, that item is on the agenda tonight, so this is for items that are not on the agenda, so you can speak during that time.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else for items not on the agenda?
How you doing? My name is Nick Karamatsos. I'm here to discuss a property that we manage down on MLK and Bellaire Road. Currently, it is as a preservation, and with that preservation, we can't clear anything out, so it's kind of overgrown with trees that we can't touch, and because of that, it's also become a homeless encampment. Within the middle of the area, there's actually also a pond. Go ahead. Right there. Okay. The preservation area is what we manage right over here. This recreational open space area is essentially a large drainage pond that is managed by FDOT. Approximately 2 years ago, they were able to finally come in and clear out a portion of it, which, let's see if I can get it to go. This is essentially the homeless encampment that was there as of 2 years ago. Now that is once again on the FDOT's portion of the land. We manage the preservation portion. We put up fences every 2-3 months, and they just kind of get ripped down within a couple of days, a week, and then people kind of go back through and just make it into a large homeless encampment. I've spoken with the police. I've spoken with the planning department. I've contacted the city manager. I've not really heard anything back from them, and we're also currently working with the city to try to investigate any other way we can change that preservation. We're working with Katie Cole as well. We need some help, and I don't know what to do with this. And then the other pictures as well, these are essentially, I just was out there today, and we cleaned it up maybe about a month and a half, 2 months ago. So it's the fence that's broken. It's consistent garbage and debris. It's tents. A couple of years ago, we found out they were actually stealing power from the bank nearby. They had tapped into it. They had fire pits going. They have TV sometimes, so they have like electricity, and there's nothing I can do but clean it up every couple of months. That's essentially my issues.
Thank you, sir. Is Ms. Spray or someone can get with this gentleman from staff and try to work some? Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Mr. Haluba, and it just seems as though the recycling debacle just goes on and on. The recycling problem is not really about city employees shirking their duties. It's not really about the resulting cover-up. It's not about restoring trust, because that still has not been done. It's not about protecting the environment. The city runs, large trucks all over the city every day. And not only that, trucks what they pick up to the next county. It's not about a lot of things, and it's not about some grandiose do-gooder idea, because if it was, it just doesn't work. What it is about is protecting a revenue stream to the city of Clearwater. And it's a wrongful revenue stream, because there's no option to, opt out of the recycling billing or have that ugly can taken off your property. It's extortion. And extortion is just another name for official corruption, and that may be why the FBI is investigating Clearwater. You can hire all the consultants you want, but what needs to be done is the refunds need to be issued, and the entire recycling program needs to be terminated. It doesn't work. It's not going to work. There are basic logistical issues with it that are not going to be solved with the new environment that, is going on. So the program needs to be terminated, refunds need to be issued, and stop extorting a fee from us every month for something that most people really are not interested in.
Anyone else on items not on the agenda? No one else, okay. Consent agenda items, is there anything to be pulled from the consent this evening? Okay, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve agenda item 7.1 through 7.13, correct?
Yes. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Public hearings, administrative public hearings.
Approve amendments to the Clearwater Comprehensive Plan to address the creation of a new Parks and Recreation Impact Fee System and pass Ordinance 9638-23 on first reading.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm Art Cater, Deputy Director, Parks and Recreation. The item before you is to amend the recreation and open space element of the City of Clearwater Comprehensive Plan to provide for a new Parks and Recreation Facilities Impact Fee System. This amendment is necessary to ensure the consistency between the comprehensive plan and the proposed text amendment, which would replace Chapter 54 of the Community Development Code. This element has not been updated since 2008, and the Community Development Code has not been updated since 1983. Specific amendments include allowing funds to be used anywhere in the city, removing language regarding the service radius of where funds could be used, and added language to incentivize development of affordable housing. The Planning and Development Department support this amendment, as well as the Community Development Board unanimously recommends its approval. I am available to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Cater? No? Okay, do we have a motion?
Move to approve agenda item 8.1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Excuse me, counsel, the attorney.
Titles for ordinance.
Oh, sorry.
If I may, ordinance number 9638-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, making amendments to the Clearwater Comprehensive Plan by amending the recreation and open space element to provide for a new Parks and Rec Facilities Impact Fee, certifying consistency with the city's comprehensive plan and proper advertisement, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 8.2.
Approve amendments to the Clearwater Community Development Code to replace Chapter 54 in its entirety with the revised Chapter 54, creating a new Parks and Recreation Impact Fee System and pass Ordinance 9639-23 on first reading.
Again, Art Cater, Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation. This item before you is to replace Chapter 54 of the Community Development Code in its entirety. The primary reason for this is that this chapter has not been sustainably or substantially revised since 1983. Secondly, the Florida Impact Fee Act requires that the impact fee be based on current data. The city hired the firm of Tyndall Oliver, now Benich of Tampa, Florida, to gather data and prepare a technical report as the basis to establish the new recreation fee system. As we discussed at work session, the current Chapter 54 has served the citizens of Clearwater well for over 40 years. However, it is time for a change because the landscape of the city has changed from one with vacant land that was available to develop to one now that is developed, and we are doing redevelopment. The proposed ordinance is focused on new residential development in Clearwater. It will replace 3 fees with one, It will replace a complicated list of formulas for establishing the fee to a simple per living unit cost. Just briefly, I'd like to share with you, as I did for the audience and others, the fees that we are proposing are simply a fee, one dwelling unit would pay this amount of money. For instance, a single-family detached home of 1,500 square feet would be $3,021. Now, this is for a new home, not for a home that perhaps got torn down or remodeled, but for a new home would cost $3,021. You can look down there, the chart. It's easy to find. Affordable multifamily gets a 50% discount. It's $1,012. And the multifamily units there are $2,024. So this will be used throughout. It's a lot easier than the complicated system as we tried to share with you at the work session. In addition, this will allow for funds to be used anywhere in the city, provide incentives for affordable housing. The Community Redevelopment Agency, or the CRA, is included in this proposal, so they will be included. The impact fees can be paid at certificates of occupancy rather than a building permit, and exemptions and credits are provided. The Planning and Development Department support this amendment, as well as the Community Development Board unanimously recommends its approval. I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Cater on this item? Everybody good? Okay, Mr. Margolis?
Go ahead and read the title of the ordinance. I do want to point out that public comment on the item must be accepted prior to voting on it. So I'm happy to read the ordinance right now. So ordinance number 9639-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, amending the Community Development Code by replacing Chapter 54 in its entirety with a revised Chapter 54, creating a new Parks and Rec Facilities impact fee, providing for Section 54.01 purpose, Section 54.02 definitions, Section 54.03 applicability, Section 54.04 calculation of impact fees, Section 54.05 method and timing of payment, Section 54.06 use of funds, Section 54.21 through 54.25 reserved, Sections 54.51 through 54.55 reserved, Appendix A, Article 15, providing for severability and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Anyone from the public who wish to speak to this item? No? Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve agenda item 8.2.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 8.3.
Approve the easement vacation request from the owners of property addressed 125 Island Way, Dolphin Harbor, to vacate a 10-foot platted public utility easement located on lots 4 and 5, Unit 2, Island Estates, according to the map or plat thereof as recorded in the Plat Book 47, page 19A and 20B, Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, and pass ordinance 9673-23 on first reading.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Robert Casmer, Real Estate Coordinator, Public Works Engineering. Before you is the request from the owners of 125 Island Way to vacate existing 10-foot platted public stormwater easement. This vacation allows for condominium development and easement relocation to existing utilities. There are no city or private utilities within this easement. City staff have reviewed and approved this request. Any questions, please?
Any questions? Mr. Margolis?
Thank you. Ordinance number 9673-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, vacating a 10-foot platted public utility easement located on lots 4 and 5, Unit 2, Island Estates, according to the map or plat thereof as recorded in Plat Book 47, page 19A and 20B of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, providing an effective date.
Do we need public comment for this?
Any ordinance for first reading?
Anyone from the public wish to speak to this? Okay, do we have a motion?
Move to approve item 8.3.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 8.4.
Thank you.
Approve amendments to the Clearwater Downtown Redevelopment Plan and pass ordinance 9663-23 on first reading.
Good evening, Lauren Matsky, Planning and Development. So tonight I'm presenting two related ordinances, this and then the next agenda item. This first ordinance contains amendments to the Clearwater Downtown Redevelopment Plan, specifically the Public Amenities Incentive Pool found in Chapter 4, Plan Implementation. The pool was established in 2004 to address various constraints affecting redevelopment, which had been identified through the planning process at that time. It's an aggregation of development potential, meaning dwelling units or floor area, and applicants can request that for individual projects. A project must include one or more public amenities in order to be eligible. Currently, only the Community Development Board is authorized to allocate units from the pool. This has been a more negotiated process, and the requirement for a public hearing takes time and the outcome is not certain up front. So the proposed amendments establish that the Community Development Coordinator may also approve allocations from the pool. This would streamline the process, and then the next agenda item will talk through what that process is proposed to be like. The second part of this particular amendment is to restructure and to expand the list of eligible amenities that a project could incorporate into it to be eligible for an allocation. The CRA trustees unanimously approved or recommended approval of the ordinance, as did the Community Development Board at their meeting on Tuesday. Procedurally, this amendment will also require approval by the Board of County Commissioners, which would be anticipated within a couple of months. So,
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Okay, anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? Mr. Margolis.
Thank you, Mayor. Ordinance number 9663-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, making amendments to the Clearwater Downtown Redevelopment Plan by amending Chapter 4, Plan Implementation, Public Amenities Incentive Pool, certifying consistency with the city's comprehensive plan and proper advertisement, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
We have a motion?
Motion to approve agenda item 8.4.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 8.5.
Approve amendment to the Community Development Code Appendix C, Downtown District and Development Standards, and pass ordinance 9664-23 on first reading.
thank you again. This ordinance establishes how the changes to the downtown redevelopment plan would be implemented by the Community Development Coordinator. As noted at work session on Monday, one of the main objectives is to provide a streamlined option for property owners or developers utilizing the pool while incentivizing certain public amenities that help meet the capital improvement needs in downtown and generate activity by bringing people to downtown. The Community Development Coordinator would be authorized to approve certain bonuses through the Development Review Committee process. This is the new Tier 1 streamlined allocation process. And then projects that propose different amenities will continue to be able to make their requests of the Community Development Board. So that would now be a Tier 2 public hearing allocation process. Proposed Table 1, which is here, identifies 9 different bonus opportunities. Not every bonus is proposed to be available in or the same for each character district, but utilizing a % bonus ensures that the potential bump in development potential is proportional across the different character districts. So I reviewed these in more detail on Monday, but briefly, there are 4 bonuses proposed to bring people to downtown. The first is incorporating rental residential units into the project. That would qualify for a higher density bonus than if other residential units were in a project. Those would also qualify for a bonus. This would be available for affordable and market rate residential projects. For non-residential uses, a project could include Class A office space, or specifically in the downtown core or Prospect Lake, or a hotel with public function spaces would be eligible for a bonus within the downtown core. There are 2 proposed bonuses to encourage sustainability measures to be incorporated within a project, achieving LEED Gold certification or an equivalent, or including both EV ready and level 2 charging parking spaces within a project. To meet the city's capital improvement needs, a project could provide public parking within structured parking or pay into the parking fund. Or alternatively, they could build the streetscape on any of their project frontages to meet the standards of the master streetscape plan. Either of these could be used for residential density, hotel density, or floor area ratio increase. The smallest proposed bonus could be requested by a project that provides public art in a publicly accessible space or pays into the public art fund. The staff report included tables illustrating the additional residential density, hotel density, or FAR that could be achieved through these bonuses. The pool is also the only way that a project can request additional height for a project, because it's expected that additional density or floor area may require some additional height in order to achieve it. The limit is currently up to 20% increase in height or a minimum of 10 feet, and there are no changes proposed to that at this time. However, amendments are incorporated to emphasize that the determination of how much additional height would, to make that determination, whoever gets to approve it, whether it be the Community Development Board or the Community Development Coordinator, would take into account the extent of the major amenities provided, the project's design, and compatibility with surrounding properties. The ordinance also includes several minor amendments which were described during the work session. So these were identified when it was too late to incorporate them into the most recent amendment to the Community Development Code that the council approved. But those accomplish several things. They bring consistency between different sections in the downtown code. They add some clarifying language, and also they incorporate standards to apply to certain frontages that were not originally included, but that was an oversight at that time. So the Community Development Board also unanimously recommended approval of this ordinance.
Any questions? No. Any member of the public wish to speak to this item? Mr. Margolis. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, I'm Bill Johnson. I attended the CDB meeting where this was discussed, and it's really taken a while to get my head into this item. I am very much in favor of incentivizing the rental rather than just a condo ownership unit, which this does. As I understand it, the items on table 1 are stacking, or most of them are stacking, in that you can get units for EVs and for rental units, and you can get it for this and that. But the first top 2 rows are rental and ownership residential, and that is not intended to be stacking, as I understand from Ms. Matsky. However, I don't see any clarification or specification in the ordinance that says that that combination is not stacking. The other thing that I would question or raise to you, in looking at the intent of this, I think we're trying to incentivize the core of the downtown area where it would be pedestrian and it would be a vital area. We recently saw a DRC meeting for a project at 708 Osceola, which is just up by the boat ramp, and they were asking for 33 units on top of a 31 units that would be regularly allowed. And that's fine, we want to activate that area, but I wonder if we're really going to be getting some of these units in the downtown core that'll be a vital pedestrian area. So I just raise that as a question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak to this item? Mr. Margolis.
This is ordinance number 9664-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, making amendments to the Community Development Code, Appendix C, Downtown District and Development Standards by amending Division 3, Character District Standards, Division 4, Frontage Standards, and Division 8, Flexibility, certifying consistency with the city's comprehensive plan and proper advertisement, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
I move to approve agenda item 8.5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 8.6, please.
Approve the annexation, initial future land use map designation of residential low, RL, and initial zoning atlas designation of low, medium density residential, LMDR district for certain residential real property described as Lot 7, Block D, Cape Rock Terrace, and pass ordinances 9668-23, 9669-23, and 9670-23 on first reading.
Good evening, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. This property is occupied by a single-family home and currently receives city services due to an agreement to annex. So now the property is contiguous to city boundaries, so the owners would like to move forward with annexation. We are recommending approval as there are no adverse impacts on services, and it would be consistent with the comprehensive plan and community development code.
Thank you. Any questions? Anyone from the public wish to speak to this item? Mr. Margolis.
Thank you, Mayor. There are three ordinances associated with this, so I'll read all three. First up, we have ordinance number 9668-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, annexing certain real property described as Lot 7, Block D, Capoc Terrace, Clearwater, Florida, into the corporate limits of the city and redefining the boundary lines of the city to include said addition and providing an effective date. The second ordinance is ordinance number 9669-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, amending the future land use element of the comprehensive plan of the city to designate the land use for certain real property described as Lot 7, Block D, Capoc Terrace, Clearwater, Florida, upon annexation into the City of Clearwater as residential low RL, providing an effective date. Finally, we have ordinance number 9670-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, amending the zoning atlas of the city by zoning certain real property described as Lot 7, Block D, Capoc Terrace, Clearwater, Florida, upon annexation into the City of Clearwater as low-medium density residential, LMDR, providing an effective date.
Okay, do we need three motions or just one?
Just one.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve agenda item 8.6.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. 8.7, please.
Deny the annexation initial future land use map designation of commercial general, CG, and initial zoning atlas designation of commercial C district for 1224 Adams Avenue, and deny ordinances 9645-23, 9646-23, and 9647-23 on first reading. Just to be clear, council, a motion to approve is actually a motion to deny the request.
Okay, this property is occupied by a single-family home. It's located on the west side of Adams Avenue, which is north of Lakeview Road. The owner is requesting annexation in order to receive city services. While the property is contiguous to city boundaries, we are recommending denial of the annexation for several reasons. The single-family home is currently non-conforming in the commercial general land use category, and Adams Avenue is a substandard right-of-way in terms of its width as well as its materials, and also their services just aren't readily available in this area. And based on these reasons, the proposed annexation is not consistent with the comprehensive plan or the community development code. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Anyone from the public wish to speak to this item? Mr. Margolis.
Go ahead and read the ordinances depending on how council votes. Technically, if council ends up denying it, there's no need for it, but I think it's safe for me to go ahead and read it, so just to play it safe. Ordinance number 9645-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, annexing certain real property located on the west side of Adams Avenue, approximately 925 feet north of Lakeview Road, whose post office address is 1224 Adams Avenue, Clearwater, Florida, 33756, into the corporate limits of the city, and redefining the boundary lines of the city to include said addition, providing an effective date. Next up is 9646-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, amending the future land use element of the comprehensive plan of the city to designate the land use for certain real property located on the west side of Adams Avenue, approximately 925 feet north of Lakeview Road, whose post office address is 1224 Adams Avenue, Clearwater, Florida, 33756, upon annexation into the City of Clearwater as commercial general, CG, providing an effective date. And finally, we have ordinance number 9647-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, amending the zoning atlas of the city by zoning certain real property located on the west side of Adams Avenue, approximately 925 feet north of Lakeview Road, whose post office address is 1224 Adams Avenue, Clearwater, Florida, 33756, upon annexation into the City of Clearwater as commercial C, providing an effective date. And just to ensure that the record is very clear, none of those ordinances will go into effect if the council moves to deny the annexation petition.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to deny?
I move to deny the annexation and the ordinances listed in item 8.7.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. 8.8, please.
Approve a future land use map amendment from residential urban RU category to the commercial general CG category for a portion of property located at 1849 Gulf to Bay Boulevard and pass ordinance 9666-23 on first reading.
This application involves a 1 to 5 acre portion of a larger 1.135 acre property located on the south of Gulf to Bay Boulevard between Keene Road and Brookside Drive. This small area of this larger property is currently designated residential urban on the future land use map, while the majority of the site is designated commercial general. The request is to amend this 35-foot strip of property designated residential to the commercial general category, so the property has one zoning and land use category. The site is adjacent to other property that is designated commercial general as well as residential urban. The immediate vicinity is characterized by a variety of commercial office uses, a cell phone tower, as well as some single-family homes, and the proposed designation is consistent with what you find in the area. Based on analysis of the impacts on city facilities that are detailed in the staff report, it has been determined that there should be no negative impacts on the existing level of services in the area. Upon a review of the comprehensive plan, staff has determined that the proposed amendment does not conflict with goals, objectives, and policies found in the plan. The Community Development Board reviewed this back in February and recommended approval.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Anyone from the public like to speak to this item? Mr. Margolis.
Ordinance number 9666-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, amending the future land use element of the comprehensive plan of the city to change the land use designation for a portion of certain real property located on the south side of Gulf to Bay Boulevard, approximately 540 feet east of Keene Road, whose post office address is 1849 Gulf to Bay Boulevard, Clearwater, Florida, 33765, from residential urban, RU, to commercial general, CG, providing an effective date.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve agenda item 8.8.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, quasi-judicial public hearings, 9.1.
Approve a zoning atlas amendment from the low-medium density residential LMDR district to the commercial C district for a portion of property located at 1849 Gulf to Bay Boulevard, and pass ordinance 9662-23 on first reading.
This is the companion zoning atlas amendment to the future land use plan amendment that you just voted on. The property is currently designated low-medium density residential, and the proposal is to rezone it to the commercial district to have consistent zoning across the entire property. As detailed in the staff report, there are no negative impacts on existing levels of services, and the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The CDB reviewed this at their February 21st meeting and unanimously recommended approval.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Anyone from the public wish to speak to this item? Mr. Margolis.
Ordinance number 9662-23, an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, Florida, amending the zoning atlas of the city by rezoning a portion of certain real property located on the south side of Gulf to Bay Boulevard, approximately 540 feet east of Keene Road, whose post office address is 1849 Gulf to Bay Boulevard, Clearwater, Florida, 33765, from low-medium density residential, LMDR, to commercial, providing an effective date.
Do we have a motion?
Motion approved, agenda item 9.1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Second readings of public hearings.
Mayor, ordinance number 9637-23 is an ordinance of the City of Clearwater, the city, Florida, amending the City of Clearwater comprehensive plan, in accordance with Section 163.3177 Florida statutes by modifying the utilities element, updating provisions relating to potable water and natural groundwater aquifer recharge needs based on the city's 10-year water supply facilities work plan 2022 through 2032, completed in accordance with the 2020 Southwest Florida Water Management District, SWIFMUD, Regional Water Supply Plan, providing for severability and providing an effective date.
Any comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve agenda item 10.1.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Next item.
Items 10.2 and 10.3 are being continued to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, city manager reports. I think this one might take a little bit. Do we want to take a 7-minute break before then? Okay, let's recess for 7 minutes. Thank you.
Motion to continue.
could call the April 20th council meeting back to order, please. And we are on item number 11, which is the city manager reports.
Approve grant award recommendations for North Greenwood Community Grant Program, Cultural Affairs Nonprofit Grant Program, and Education Grants and Partnerships Program, subject to negotiation and execution of grant agreements, and authorize administering department directors to execute same.
Good evening, Denise Sanderson, Economic Development and Housing, on behalf of the City Manager's Office tonight. And so we discussed this on Monday. I'll try not to go into a lot of detail, but certainly can answer some questions. But generally, for the record, on December 12th, the City of Clearwater issued a call for applications for 3 competitive grant programs funded by Revenue Recovery Funds received from American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. At the close of the application period on February 15th, 81 applications were received with requests for more than $9.7 million in grants. By the end of March, all applications had been reviewed and for eligibility and scored based on a number of factors, including consistency with objectives and the apparent ability and capacity of the organizations to deliver the described program in a timely manner. And timeliness is important because, as you know, encumbrance is required by the end of 2024 and expenditure by the end of 2026. So moving into the grant programs themselves, for the North Greenwood Community Grant, which is to be administered by our CRA, we had $1.4 million available. Eligibility included consistency with goals and objectives of the CRA plan, serving Greenwood residents, students who attend schools in the area or who work in North Greenwood businesses, and they must demonstrate the capacity to expand services as well as a realistic and a reasonable approach to expend the funds in a timely manner. They must support activities, programs, and services for youth and adults impacted by pressing socioeconomic concerns. Additionally, applicants were notified that preference was to be given to organizations located within the North Greenwood community or that could demonstrate a history of working successfully in the community, or that could demonstrate established partnerships with Greenwood stakeholders, and to proposals that have the potential to be sustainable or a scalable model. 57 applications were submitted by the deadline, requesting $6.6 million in funds. It's approximately 474% of available funding. Staff is recommending 25 projects for funding awards. This will fully encumber the $1.4 million allocation. So moving on to Cultural Affairs. This is the Cultural Affairs Nonprofit Grant Program. We had $1 million available in 2 programs, namely the ongoing program support and the specific cultural projects. These are for existing programs wishing to bring back to pre-pandemic levels, or for those projects that did not require ongoing costs other than routine maintenance or utilities. Staff is recommending grant awards for 5 projects, and as recommended, these awards will encumber just over $571,000, leaving approximately $429,000 available for a second round of solicitations in that program. For the Education Grants and Partnerships, this is to be administered by the City Clerk Department. We had $750,000 available for activities that address and mitigate learning loss through evidence-based programs. Grant awards are to be limited to nonprofit organizations and stakeholders with experience in providing these programs who must serve Clearwater residents or students attending schools within the City of Clearwater limits. Grants can be used to implement new or expand existing programming, but the allowable activities are limited to after-school and summer bridge, high-impact tutoring, STEM enrichment programs, and student readiness for successful transitions, example, pre-K to elementary, elementary to middle, etc. 11 applications were submitting, requesting nearly $1.4 million, which is 186% of available funds. Staff is recommending 5 projects at $150,000 each. And as recommended, this will fully encumber this pot of money for that grant program. So upon approval, of these grant recommendations, the administrating departments will negotiate the grant awards, reporting requirements, and how payments will be made. I'll point out that in some cases, there will be some limited prepayments provided, or funds may be put into an escrow or with a fiscal agent for safekeeping, but in most cases, funding will be provided on a reimbursement basis. And prioritization will be for those projects and programs that will begin this summer, followed by those that will begin with the new school year. I'm happy to take any questions, and we have representatives from the administrating departments to help me out.
Okay, any questions or comments on this item? No? Yes? Okay. Anyone from the public wish to speak to this item?
Good evening. I won't personally address each of you because the time clock kind of runs down fast. My name is Darlene Allen, and I've been a resident of the city of Clearwater for 47 years. I stand on behalf of the North Greenwood Life Changers, preventing recidivism, being one of the groups denied support through the grant funding. This denial not only affects this group, but will have an everlasting impact on the community and its citizens, especially those returning from a period of incarceration. Those waiting to be released, those ones whom the society has deemed to be the least of them. The North Greenwood Life Changers have been in operation for the past 2 years, diligently working to help our returning citizens stand on a firm foundation. I have next to me, one of those citizens that we have helped. We have also partnered with HEP, Safe Harbor, the Joshua House, the Burley Center, the Ministerial Alliance, and several others to help us facilitate this program. Today, at 12:30 noon, I was able to place an individual seeking shelter at the HEP Center, since they have agreed to partner with us. This gentleman is employed, but sleeping outdoors due to his incarceration history. One individual was placed last week into HEAP, and I have one on standby, waiting for the bed, so that he can have a safe place to sleep and to take advantage of much-needed resources. When those resources aren't available, we, the North Greenwood Life Changers, take it out of our own pockets and utilize our own vehicles to help transport these individuals. You may ask, what is recidivism and what's our group mission? Recidivism is a released offenders relapsed into criminal behavior, AKA repeat offenders. Our goal is to prevent repeated criminal behavior by empowering the individual with the tools needed to succeed. I got to skip. In closing, I would like to introduce a little bit about me. I spent 34 and a half years employed as a Pinellas County Sheriff's Deputy, investigating minor offenses all the way up to major crimes. In case you're wondering if I now have buyer's remorse, the answer is no. Matthew 25:40 will explain it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Billings would like to also speak.
Well, howdy, everyone. Well, I gotta say, it is a pleasure to be here, meet you all. I gotta say that they have in their district, as far as the program, has been real. No falseness or fakeness or scandals that I know. It's been good to me. I'm asking in a nice way, in a kind way. You know what I'm saying? What I would like to see on my behalf is fairness, rightness. You understand? That's a good thing to consider at this time. The way things are, but they definitely deserve, whatever they're asking for, what we're asking for here, to be fair, And the Greenwood area is the poorest area. Did y'all know that? The poorest community? So let's work on that, please, nicely and kindly. You understand? And for the guys who are coming out of prison, no matter what color they are, something definitely needs to be done with that instead of, I guess, waiting for them to return, you understand? And also with them coming out of prison with nothing, just to add that in there, something, you understand? Yes, we want to see everybody make it. No man left behind, no woman either, no child. You understand? Thank y'all kindly.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else like to speak to this item?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Doris Barnes, and I'm a lifelong resident of the North Greenwood area. I'm the founder and CEO of the Blessed Ones, a member of the Greenwood Life Changers. I received the email from the city of Clearwater stating that the Blessed Ones did not receive a grant funding at this time. I was somewhat let down by the decision because lives are at stake. The Blessed One provides a solution to help women transition back into society after a period of incarceration and resume a normal life, such as reuniting with family, stable living, educational skill, job training, and emotional and mental support. I too was once a returning citizen. So understand the merit of having a family, So understanding the magnitude of having a family and a home and available resource to return to. These things help me become the person I am today. I am passionate about helping women return to society. Statistics shows that most women return back to incarceration after a period of 1 year if resources are not available. The Blessed Ones was formed to meet this demand needed for women. Research has shown that there are over 81,000 women incarcerated through the United States. They will continue to return to our or their community. What do we have to offer them? The Blessed Ones stands ready to help, and we need your support. The Blessed Ones would like to know if there will be opportunities for others and myself who did not receive fundings to reapply or to be considered for funding. I would like to introduce to you one of my recipients, the Blessed Ones, of the Blessed Ones, Tammy.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
My name is Tammy. My real name is, I go by Tammy, but my real name is Latricia Webb. Miss Doris, I've been on drugs for many, many years. I could say at least 24 years. And August the 1st will be a year I've been clean with the help of her for like 5 years. I've been going in and out of prison. She's been sending me boxes and, just everything, just nothing. I'm just doled out there. No shoes, no clothes, living at the park. My kids and grandkids had to come see me. But I started going to church with her in August, 8/1/2022. And I started I got sick and tired of really being sick and tired of. I had burn marks, my lips was messed up, I had scars everywhere. One time it was just disgusting. She would bring me underwear, clothes, and everything. And it's like a revolving door until now she took me to church with her. And she started giving me things out of her closet to wear and started telling me a closed mouth don't get fed. And if you want, I got to help her in order to help. I got to help her help me. So I started going to the church with her and being for real and start playing and everything. And as of now, 8/1/24, I'll be clean and sober finally for a year after 24 years of her help, food and shelter. So she's been a blessing to me. And I thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this item?
Good evening. My name is Pastor Carlton Childs, President of the Upper Pinellas County Ministry Alliance. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Manager, and Council. I am the President of Upper Pinellas County Ministry Alliance, speaking for the pastors in the North Greenwood community, President of Upper Life Ministries, Joshua House Reentry and Recovery Center. We've been in business for over 20 years. Over 500 men and women have been through our programs. Director of the North Greenwood Life Changers, Director of the Refuse to Lose Youth Initiative that our wonderful Chief of Police, Chief Slaughter, sponsors. And I said all of these things to say this, that we've got our hands in all of these committees and programs, and we're on the ground in the North Greenwood community. We're seeing, a matter of fact, I want to invite you, all of you, to come. You may not come, but come and be with us, spend a day with us on the ground in North Greenwood community, and see if your dollars that you awarded is being put to use in the North Greenwood community. These programs and these men and women that you heard from today, these are the ones that's on the ground. These are the boots that's on the ground. These are the hands that are at work in that North Greenwood. I was born and raised in North Greenwood community, retired from the military, been to college, amen, but we need your support. We trust you, we elected you, we believe in you, and when the CRA was approved, we had the hope that it was finally time that things were going to change. Very disappointed in the way things went last week. I understand administratively that dotting the I's, crossing the T's, I understand all of that stuff. It looks good on paper. Looks good on paper, look real good. And that just justifies the decision that y'all made. I know that decision could be changed any day, Ms. Kathleen, because of a vote, a decision that y'all make each and every day. Let's make the right decision to award some of that money that we still have, that should have been awarded to some of these committees that are on the ground working. I get 25 to 30 calls a day as a pastor, as a president of the Ministerial Alliance, and guess who I call? I call these folk. These are the ones I call. We're placing people every day, feeding people every day, taking furniture to these folks. And it's coming out of their pockets, my pockets, the Ministerial Alliance pockets. We need y'all here. Will y'all reconsider the ones that y'all giving, and please help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak to this item? Anyone else? No one else? Okay. Any more discussion from the council? Yes, ma'am.
So thank you for getting up and sharing your thoughts about the grant administration. So I appreciate your concerns, especially about the recidivism programs. And I will say that I met Doris Barnes about 4 or 5 years ago when I knocked on her door, and we had a conversation, and that conversation was about her dream to open kind of a transition home for women exiting prison. And I said, oh, I just read a book. It was called Becoming Mrs. Burton, and brought it over to her, and she read it, and we picked it up a few years ago, and it was about a woman who, it was in Los Angeles, and she had been a repeat offender, in and out. Her trouble started with a son who was run over by a police officer in the street, like 9 years old, and it just devastated her, and she went into substance abuse and depression, and then just entered this prison cycle again and again and again. And anyway, so I know that's been your dream. And I wonder, are there transition homes or special programs for women in particular in this area? And I know Pastor Childs, mentioned my name up there about a vote. But I was not part of the grant writing the grant descriptions or the rubric or scoring or anything like that. And so I don't, and I've been part of grant rank and review programs with my continuum of care work. And so, we do our best with the parameters that are given. But I would ask, I think one of the questions I want to be clear on is in that North Greenwood CRA, when we have a goal that's different than the downtown CRA, which is about blight and economic development and building. And the North Greenwood one, it's my understanding the focus is more on reduction of poverty. And you have 7 to 9 different focus areas. And I think preventing recidivism is one of them. And so are there going to be, will CRA money generated in the North Greenwood CRA be able to be used for these types of soft things, or is it only for buildings and structures, even though the goal is a reduction of poverty?
Sure. So the CRA statute, as currently written, is contemplated as real property related. It's designed to either acquire real estate, improve real estate, things like that. It typically has to have some kind of nexus to the real estate. The legislature has tightened up the restrictions on CRA funds a lot over the past few years. That's something that League of Cities, the Florida Redevelopment Association, is always opposing, but that is where we're currently at in terms of CRA funds. So those monies would typically have to be related to real estate in some way. It could be anything from affordable housing to help cleaning up property, but it typically has to involve some fixture rather than just programming. So for example, if there's a nonprofit that is looking to lease space, we could potentially look at leasing space through CRA funds. Things like that would be a proper use as long as it's tied back to real estate in some way.
So if the dream is to find a way to offer transitional help to women, returning citizens, I'm just going to use, Doris, your example. Those funds, when they start to come, might be able to be used for a facility or a location, but then the person running that program needs to get funding to actually run the program in a different way, not from CRA funds, right? We're going to have to find different funding source to make those things happen.
For the most part, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Anything else? Yes, I was just going to ask you to come up.
Thank you. If I may, I'll just remind the council that City of Clearwater is a recipient of CDBG funding and other sources of funding that may be appropriate for nonprofit use. What has been described tonight is what I would view as a public facility, presuming that there's a nonprofit status associated with this. But as you say, and I'm certain as you know, CDBG oddly has a 15% cap on our allocation for public services, for the delivery of services. And that is our only funding source from our entitlement funding sources for that kind of use. So to your point, the availability of funds for service programs, for salary support and other things, very limited through CRA and through other means at this time.
Let me just stay with us for a second. And Dr. Matthews, could you come up for us, please? So what I would like you to do is just briefly what you did at the work session, review how we are working with the folks that are interested that did not receive grants and what the potential is in the near future.
Absolutely, Jay Matthews, CRA Director. What I would like to say is that we did award some grant writers, so it would be appropriate for any organization to be able to exercise the right to use that. Those grant writers who were awarded to write grants for organizations in and around North Greenwood. Secondly, the Clearwater Urban Leadership Coalition wrote a grant and wrote an application and they were awarded. They have a line in there to pay for grant writers or fees for that, as well as award micro grants. So feel free to see the Clearwater Urban Leadership Alliance. They were awarded and they can give out micro grants, as well as take care of grant writers' fees or grant fees for seeking other funding for things that the CRA cannot pay for. As it relates to assisting applicants with strengthening their applications, I believe it was Cultural Affairs. They are working with a third party to help strengthen grants as it relates to cultural affairs projects. We were talking recently, just today, of how we can also lend strengthening or help strengthen applications. I've actually met with 2 people so far from the pool of people who were denied. Life Changers was one yesterday. I met with Mr. and Mrs. Watson yesterday. We went over the score. We went over how they could possibly strengthen their application, and we did speak Attorney Margolis about, the resources that we have in the CRA. Could they use a building? Could we use a CRA property? Those types of things. So we had that discussion for well over an hour yesterday. And I will continue to have those. I did meet the CRA director one-on-ones in the downtown CRA, and we will be launching those in North Greenwood as well. So people can voice their concerns, questions, and I can pretty much figure out how we're going to steer our grant programming. I know that it has to be toward real estate for the most part, but we also have programs and incentives and things like that. As you said, this is a different CRA. It's a different niche, and we can figure out the best way to, create a robust grant program that can best suit this community.
Great. And so you have an excellent resource here, so please utilize and contact her, and she'll be happy to meet with you and discuss what you can do going forward. Now, did I hear incorrectly Monday, are there still some funds available down the road, or are they all spoken for at this time?
Every single penny.
Every penny, okay. I heard incorrectly then.
No, we just have, we have
Arts and
$428,000 from
culture.
cultural affairs.
That's,
Yeah,
yeah,
culture.
okay, so that's for arts and culture, okay.
Of the $1.4 million for the
Yes.
CRA grants, I would say,
Okay.
or the North
Okay.
Greenwood grants.
And wasn't there discussion on Monday that we might, or is her Brianna, who's our cultural arts?
Amber Bright.
Amber. That Amber was saying that she may craft different language for the remaining funds. And where's the timeline for that, and what is she thinking? Sorry, Amber, I'm sorry, I forgot you.
Amber Bryce, Cultural Affairs Coordinator. We had discussed, myself and the panel, possibly rewording or restructuring the grant to have clearer language of what we're looking for from our applicants.
Okay.
Oh, so for just for clarity, not to expand it or change it in some way, but more just for clarity of what the expectations are?
More for clarity, and I would look to the council for guidance on, there's very strict requirements. The 1 year of arts and cultural programming, they had to already kind of be an organization that was active. We had a couple of new organizations apply. They were not recommended for funding simply because they didn't have that history.
So maybe changing that?
We could, and that's, I look to council for guidance on that. We'd like to change those parameters.
What kind of timeline are you looking at for that type of, a discussion about changing the language?
We'd like to reopen the grant by summer, so July, ideally.
Open it up by July, you
Yes.
think? Okay.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
I just want to say I'd be happy to come and spend a day or how many days you want me to talk with you about what can be done and other sources of funding that we might be able to tap into. So I'll see you after the meeting.
Okay. Again, we have a great resource here. Please utilize her, and she'll be happy to do all she can to help you. Great job. Thank you.
Also, I just wanted to add that we did receive quite a few requests for scores, even those who were awarded, and so our scores will be going out next week to all applicants who requested them. So just send a message to request, and you can see how we scored, and we're more than willing to go through each applicant's score. And the panel also said we'd be willing to have sessions with people who wanted to look more into why they were scored as they were.
Great. Thank you very much. Anything else from the council on this item? Okay. All right. Do we have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve agenda item 11.1.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. City attorney reports.
All right, city attorney's reports, always an exciting time. Go ahead and do this.
So I can leave?
Can I? No. At least I don't affect the quorum, right? All right, let's go ahead and get right into it. I think, Mayor, this evening, the best thing that I can do is start off by updating the public on our timeline, because as we know, even though we have a lot of one-on-one private conversations, it's not a substitute for having a public dialogue or a substitute for council members being able to interact with each other. So I'd like to update council on what's been going on since the referendum, particularly as it pertains to the Bluffs. As the council knows, we have two separate projects, one of which is the old City Hall site, which is being developed by Gotham, the other of which is the Harborview site being developed by the D'Annunzio Group on the hospitality side. So in terms of a timeline, Ms. Cole, who represents Gotham and D'Annunzio, reached out to me around New Year's, and I don't recall the exact days, so don't quote me on it, but she reached out around New Year's to request an extension of due diligence. Due diligence, as I noted in the agenda item, is expected in every commercial real estate transaction. It's especially important in a transaction like this, where we have complex environmental topographic features, as well as market research that needs to be performed. As the council is aware, when Ms. Cole reached out to me, we briefed the council on that, and the council was comfortable extending the due diligence period through the end of April. The next event, at least from my perspective, was really on Friday, March 24th. At that point, the city manager, the assistant city manager, and I met with Gotham to receive the updated information as a result of the additional diligence that they had been conducting over the past couple months. Now, I want to mention as an aside, although this is not directly related to Gotham, that was the same week that our former mayor had resigned. So during that period, we did not have the mayor seated. Keep in mind that the council during that time had not yet had an opportunity to reconvene and even discuss filling the mayoral vacancy. But we did have at least 4 council members who could be briefed on that in the next week, which we'll get to momentarily. So when the manager and I met with Gotham on Friday, March 24th, I thought that was a very robust meeting. We got into brass tacks very quickly. We got into the substance of what they have learned through due diligence very quickly. And to summarize, they explained the challenges that they have been facing in financing the project. They offered the very specific reasons why they feel that they are not able to make the project successful on the old City Hall site specifically. To be clear, we are not talking about the hotel. We are not talking about the Harborview site being developed by Mr. D'Annunzio. It's a separate project, even though they've put in as one proposal. We are, however, talking about the financing of the old City Hall site and more specifically the residential component of it. Some of those factors are mentioned in Gotham's presentation, so I won't reiterate them. But I will say that even though it was a very good and productive meeting, there were still some limited takeaways that we could have. I don't fault anyone for that, but it was the first meeting where the manager and I got to hear the status in terms of what is the result of this. And Gotham presented a fairly specific ask at that point to modify the terms of our existing deal. So once we heard that, there was a lot of information to take in. At that point, we were told a lot of information, which was very helpful, and I appreciate the conversation and dialogue that we had on the 24th, but we were not allowed to take or keep any documents at that moment. I don't fault Gotham for that, because when you are having an early conversation about things that are unfolding rapidly, you don't want misinformation to get out there as something is progressing quickly. So that's not a critique, but it means that there was a lot for the manager and I to take in without literally taking any documents with us. The way that we ended that meeting on March 24th left with some homework for me, as well as some homework for Ms. Cole. The homework for me was to begin briefing the 4 council members who were seated at the time. And the homework for her was to send me some documents. I began requesting a lot of information from them, everything from construction estimates to market research, insurance information, all of the things that would help us evaluate the accuracy and reasonableness of what it was that they were asking us to change. And those changes are very significant. There's no other way to say it. The next week, which was the week of March 27th through Friday, the end of March, I briefed the 4 council members on what we had learned up until that point, which was a lot to take in, but I appreciate the council bearing with us through that process. The following week, which really started on Friday, March 31st, and continued through Tuesday, April 4th, I started receiving a lot of those documents that I had requested from Gotham. And I want to say, I absolutely believe that they have been transparent in this process. They have asked for, or they have given me everything that I have asked for. There has been nothing that they have refused to provide up until now. There may be more things I asked for, but up until now, everything I have asked for has been provided. It did take a little time for them to get those things together, but I don't fault them for it because, again, this is a rapidly evolving situation. So by Tuesday, April 4th, I had received all of the documents that I had requested to date. The next meeting that we had with Gotham, which was after March 24th, actually took place the following day after April 4th, meaning April 5th. At that meeting, Jay Ravens, our finance director, and I met with Gotham. I wanted Mr. Ravens to attend that meeting to hear from Gotham a lot of the financial aspects of it, because the asks that they have significant financial implications, and I wanted to ensure that he would hear it for himself, that he would have an opportunity to ask follow-up questions, to digest what was going on. The next meeting that we had, at least formally, occurred on Tuesday, April 11th. The city manager and I attended that meeting together with Gotham, and during that meeting, we spent a lot of time with Gotham refining their ask. The initial ask that came in on March 24th had a component of tax abatement, and policy wisdom aside, we really don't have any statutory mechanism to do that. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a non-starter because we simply have no legal authority to do it. So we took the opportunity to continue refining that ask from Gotham and get down to something that is at least statutorily permissible, so that way there's something for council to consider whether you're interested or not. The meeting on Tuesday, April 11th, I thought was excellent. We started going through a lot of the details as to what that cake could look like. The analogy that I've given with a couple of you is that negotiating any deal, or as the case may be, reconsidering any aspect of a deal is kind of like baking a cake. Because you have ingredients into the cake, and the more ingredients you put in and the batter you put together, it starts to take shape. But you don't really know until the end if that cake is going to be a masterpiece, or it's going to taste delicious, or it's going to come out very poorly, as my cakes often would. So the meeting on the April 11th was terrific. Friday, April 14th, we had another meeting. Mr. Delk attended that meeting with me, and we continued refining that process, particularly as it came to one component of their ask, which was the purchase money mortgage. That's one that needs a lot of discussion. That's a very complex ask that can involve some significant implications for all stakeholders. So lots of good conversations as we continued refining that. On Monday, March 17th in the afternoon, I received the updated presentation from Ms. Cole. That updated presentation is attached to the council item this evening from Gotham. I would encourage everyone to read it as far as the public, the media, because it really lays out, I think, in good detail what Gotham's perspective is on the issues. So that's the timeline. I want to next talk about why this is coming up now specifically, right? Why does it not come up sooner before the council? And why does it not come up later if the cake is only half baked, as it were? And the answer to why it didn't arise sooner, well, first of all, keep in mind our new mayor was recently installed. He didn't have the benefit of being on the council in March, so I think the mayor deserves an opportunity to get up to speed on something that is a major, major project for the city. But the second reason it didn't arise sooner is that this meeting tonight is the first meeting at which I feel that the ask from Gotham is sufficiently detailed and sufficiently fleshed out that council could have a very reasonable and intelligent conversation about the ask. Now, that doesn't mean that all of the details are fleshed out. Indeed, there are significant details that have not been, just because our time frame has been so compressed. But there's at least enough there that I feel, through the extensive one-on-ones that we've had, that council has the gist of it, and the council can have a reasonable discussion over whether this is in the ballpark of something that you're interested in, or whether it is not. So that's why it didn't arise sooner. As far as why it hasn't come up later, certainly the instinct from most attorneys would be to not present anything publicly and only brief counsel one-on-one until there's a final product that the attorney and or the manager are prepared to raise our right hand and say that we absolutely think this is the best deal for Clearwater, or, as the case may be, to raise our right hand and say that we do not believe that there's a deal that is suitable for the city of Clearwater. So it is not normally my style to bring a half-baked cake for a public discussion. However, in this particular instance, we have unique time constraints. The due diligence period, as the council knows, expires at the end of April, and Gotham has emphasized to me on many occasions that they will not and cannot take any risk of a public default or being in default of a public project. Therefore, because this is the final meeting in April prior to the expiration of the diligence period, it is vital that we bring the discussion item now so that council has an opportunity to weigh in on it. So what's the current iteration? Well, if we look through my agenda item, the council will see that the major components based on the last proposal from Gotham include the following. First, they're proposing a reduction in density to a 400-unit single-tower building. Second, they are proposing to improve the parking ratio from the 1-to-1, which is currently in our code, to 1.1-to-1. Third, they're proposing that the parking will be reallocated such that up to 2 levels of parking would be allowed above ground, none of which will be visible from Osceola. The current arrangement requires them to put virtually all parking underground with allowances only for minimal surface parking. The fourth component of Gotham's ask would require a purchase money mortgage, which is another way of saying seller financing. As the council is aware, the current arrangement requires Gotham to pay us the full appraised value, which is $15.4 million for the parcel, at the time of closing. That time of closing is currently scheduled or expected to happen at the end of next year, give or take a couple months. The purchase money mortgage would delay our receipt of those funds or any portion thereof for 10 years if council were to go that route. The council can see that there's an alternative proposal that has been brought out, which would reduce the purchase price based on the theory and actuality that $15.4 million was the purchase price based on condos. As the council knows, we have insisted that apartments be constructed here and not condos. Apartments do not have the same value as condos. So the alternative configuration would be a lower purchase price with a shorter time period of repayment. Nevertheless, either one would be a delay of either 5 to 10 years before repayment is triggered. I mentioned earlier that the subordination question is one that still needs to be discussed. Gotham's presentation does not mention that. However, we have discussed it on several occasions, and that's one that, although it is technical in nature, it can affect the probability of us getting repaid at the end. So it is an important conversation to have. Finally, Gotham's ask includes a remaining $4 million gap after the modifications that we have just discussed. The $4 million gap from Gotham's perspective could be filled by any number of different mechanisms. When we met on April 11th, for example, Ms. Cole offered the possibility, or at least suggested in conversation, the possibility that the city could delete the pedestrian bridge. That is certainly one option, which would be a way of filling the gap. However, from Gotham's perspective, they are not married to that proposal or any particular proposal, but they are trying to, from their point of view, fill a specific financial gap. So for them, it doesn't really matter if we were to cut them a check of $4 million from general fund reserves, or whether it involves the deletion of the bridge and the reallocation of our 50-50 balance from the bridge, or anything else that fills a $4 million subsidy. As I mentioned, some things that we have not yet discussed, in addition to the subordination question on the purchase money mortgage, there are details of timelines. Ms. Cole has indicated to me that Gotham is willing to put some additional timelines on this so that the public would have perhaps additional confidence that the project is moving forward. Right now, the timeline, I think, is already very clear for pre-development, meaning that they must get through the entire pre-development by the end of 2024. They have indicated that they'd be willing to put some more milestones on that in the pre-development process. One aspect, however, that we have not discussed with Gotham is the timeline for construction. That was not a concern really up until now. However, if the council is interested in modifying our arrangement, then I believe that's something that we would need to discuss through one-on-one meetings to see if that's important to the council. The third aspect of this that we have not yet had an opportunity to discuss, and again, this is not anyone's fault, it's just that we are doing this under an incredibly compressed time frame, would be any details relating to clawback provisions. The factors that Gotham has cited in particular include things like rising interest rates, and Ms. Cole and I have had discussions, at least in general terms, about the city potentially clawing back or being compensated if interest rates were to drop or other circumstances were to manifest that produce cost savings for Gotham. Although we have talked about that in concept, we do not at this point have a specific proposal from them as to what that clawback would look like. So those are the things that we have discussed. Those are the things that we have not discussed. As the council can see, I did not put a specific recommendation in the agenda item. I did put 3 options. The council knows that we've talked through them at length through one-on-one meetings. But I did not put a specific recommendation because, candidly, this is difficult. This is a hard conversation to have, and I have the blessing and the curse of knowing what each one of you feel about this topic, because we each talk one-on-one so much, but of course the 5 of you are not able to speak with each other. And so I have heard the diverse perspectives on these issues from all 5 of you, and yet because of the privilege that we share, as well as because of sunshine law violations, we have not passed that along, and nor has the manager. So it is intentional that I have given the 3 options, that we've talked through some of the pros and cons, but that I have not made a recommendation at this point. That said, happy to answer any questions from council. If there are any, of course, the manager is here, the assistant manager is here, finance director is here as well, and Gotham is here, and I'm sure they'd be happy to speak as well.
Any questions right now for Mr. Margolis from the council?
I'm not sure who can answer this, but I've had several conversations in the last couple of days and I've had some common questions being repeated to me, and I would like to go on record with the answer. And one of the concerns that I've been hearing is, with the changes to the parking, has the city's contribution changed in any way?
It is not. So the city's contribution per the development agreement is set at $22 million total for both sides of the project. The city, from our standpoint, when negotiating the original deal, did not necessarily care how Gotham and D'Annunzio divided amongst themselves, because for us it's just $22 million. However, the way they have chosen to divide it amongst themselves, which is their prerogative, is to split it so that $5 million is going to the Harbor View project, meaning going to Dustin's project. $17 million is going to the old City Hall site. That's not surprising, because a lot more of the parking is on the old City Hall site. So given that we're talking specifically about Gotham's portion of the project, their $17 million, as well as the city's overall $22 million, would remain the same, at least as currently proposed by Gotham. Their explanation for this is that they are looking to fill a financial gap, and so if the city's contribution is diminished, then it actually widens that chasm. I'm not, endorsing or disagreeing, but that has been the feedback that we have received.
And then the other one that I've been getting was, what does it mean? What does it mean to Clearwater deferring the 15.4 mil or the 7 for 5? What does that mean for Clearwater? And I was having a hard time explaining that, quantifying it.
Well, I think it means 2 things. I think number one, it means that for the purposes for which those funds were going to be spent, we will have to identify other sources of funds. And so I think Mr. Ravens would probably be the best person to speak to that. But the second thing it would mean, so that's in the short term to medium term. In the long term, the question is really what is the probability that we're going to get paid at the end of 10 years? Now, Gotham has, I will say, argued vociferously that this is a low-risk proposition for the city because we are recording a mortgage, right? It is secured by the property. And that may very well be true. However, it's difficult to evaluate the risk because at this point we don't have any details regarding what the subordination piece of it would look like. So I can say there's a non-zero risk, but it may be a risk that the city is comfortable with. It really depends on what the details look like, and that's unfortunately until we get farther along in that process, it's difficult for me to intelligently assess what that risk really is in the real world.
And then last but not least, this is the most difficult question that I got. They want a specific number with an ask. What is the ask? What's the bottom line? What's the number? And I think it's very hard to encompass all that and come up with a real number. But if anybody has a number associated with the ask, I would love to have that number.
I can only offer, the reason it's difficult to answer that question is not to be cagey. The reason it's difficult to answer that question is it depends on whose perspective you're looking at it through. I think from Gotham's standpoint, they would say that they have a certain financial gap from the project. That gap needs to be satisfied in order to get them back to a 6% untrended yield to cost or something like it. So if you ask Gotham, you could ask them the question of, well, what is your gap that you are looking to fill? On the other hand, from the city's standpoint, and we say, well, what is the ask of us? It's a harder question to answer because on one hand, we know that there are direct financial asks of us, which would include the $4 million. It would include the deferral of the $15.4 million, which, at least in theory, we would get at the end of 10 years, but it would be deferred. And then there's the reduction in density. The reduction in density is hard to answer as an ask because on one hand, that can be a significant drop in revenue for the CRA compared to what the project was supposed to look like, but on the other hand, it is still a major improvement compared to zero. And so it is more a matter of perspective, I would say, than anything else in terms of how you evaluate what the full ask really is.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I just have one question, and I'll reserve comments till later, but so when we're looking at this gap, this funding gap, how far did we get on the, I keep going back to this because we appraised the lot at $15.4 million. It was appraised at highest and best use, but we're the ones that asked them not to build highest and best use. We're the ones that asked them to do apartments. So if we were to value the property based on apartments, it seems to me that there's about a $7 million gap there. That, in other words, that they've overpaid $7-point-something million. So that could be something that could be given back, and I would feel better about that than just taking money out of reserves or something and then throwing at it. Has that been discussed with them?
So a couple things. So since you and I had that conversation, I have brought that up with Gotham, and I asked them to put together a proposal that would, in fact, encapsulate that. One of the proposals that they have made as one of the options available would involve a reduction in purchase price to $7.6 million, that being the 2021 appraised value for apartments. Now, what's interesting about that ask is that configuration is two things. First, it does not ameliorate the other asks that they are looking for, and so I think
it doesn't help.
I don't say it doesn't help, but I would just say it's a variation. It's an alternative to a $15.4 million purchase price deferred 10 years. Mm-hmm. It's similar, although not identical for them, but similar enough to have a $15.4 million purchase price deferred 10 years versus a $7.6 million purchase price deferred 5 years. Now, that's very interesting math when you think about it, because it seems like that's a pretty big jump from $7.6 million to $15.4 million with only a 5-year difference in payment. The reason is fairly technical, and it has to do with the way that they calculate their project costs. As I understand it, and Gotham can certainly speak more to this, when they push out the payment a decade, it is far enough out that they don't have to factor that into their yield to cost. Okay. And so their yield to cost actually rises, which is what they want to see. On the other hand, a $7.6 million, although it's a much better purchase price, is actually being, right, it doesn't meet the 10 years, okay. So because it's being paid earlier.
I remember we did talk about that.
Right, it's actually being factored into their yield to cost. Again, I would defer to Gotham to the more detailed explanation, but I think that's a pretty good explanation, and I see Mr. Pickett nodding, so.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So I don't have a question right now, but I have a suggestion. And I think before we get into the details of deferred mortgage and all that stuff, the parking fee and all that business, I think we need to answer the question if we're okay with the differential between the referendum question and what's being proposed right now. And if we're okay with that, then people can go forward and talk about the minutia and all that business. But I have a couple of key statements about that, answering that question and looking at this topic through And I just think it's wise to operate that way. And if I still have the floor, here are a couple of things I think we need to be okay with, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not okay with them, and my flippin' thing has frozen up.
Want to pass the baton to Bunker for now?
Yeah, sure. If you, well.
She has notes.
What?
What are you looking?
No, I'm looking for my notes. And I want to get it right, so I'm going to wait for this thing to behave if somebody wants to chime in about the idea of looking. Here we go. Okay. Again. Technology, right?
It's marvelous when it works.
I know.
That's why.
Right.
Old school.
I'm old school, yeah.
Come on, sticker. It'll just take a second.
But-
Here it
well,
comes,
let me-
here it is, here it
okay,
is,
okay.
here it is. Okay, okay, all right. All right. So we need to address voters who are questioning and skeptical of our democratic process, because these proposed changes are very different than what was presented and what our voters voted on. Putting financial concerns to the side for a moment, which I have serious concerns about the financials. I believe this proposal is just too far off the mark of what we promoted and what voters approved. I would ask, what message are we sending to those who respond to RFPs about us sticking with the required parameters in responding to RFPs? There are those who responded to the Bluff development with housing numbers similar to these, but we dismissed them because we wanted to maximize the density on that property. We required, or we emphasized, underground parking, and now the changes, 2 levels of above ground property, or parking. And those who may not have responded because we insisted on certain parameters. What are we communicating to future developers when we send out RFPs and we say, this is what we want, and some of them provide all that, they provide that, and we look at it and we make a judgment, and then months down the road, we switch and we change, and we say, well, it's okay, we can do it differently now. We are asked to close the financial gap with Clearwater taxpayer dollars, and we get less in return. Fewer rental units, less square footage of retail, no pedestrian bridge. And then I'm going to call this, and this isn't a pretty word, but I'm going to call this kind of the patsy factor. What signal are we sending to other partners that we are or may be in discussions with for public-private partnerships? We can be cornered and manipulated at the last minute. Are we okay with that? And so those are key things. What did we present to voters, and what did they vote on? How different is the project now? What are we sending, what message are we sending to developers when we send out RFPs and then we change them way further down the line? And then how can we be okay with paying more for less? And then finally, what signal are we sending to other partnerships? And I'm talking about the Phillies, the church. There are other things that we've got coming down the line in negotiating and holding firm with things that we decide and value. So those are real concerns I have. I don't feel comfortable with what we're talking about in this presentation with 1 tower, no bridge, fewer units, all that stuff, more money the city's kicking in. I think it's too different than what that referendum question was.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor?
I definitely understand those concerns. I think we were all disappointed when we heard about these changes that Gotham wanted to do. And my first reaction was the same. Let's walk away. Let's try to do this again in the future. But when you look at the factors that went into this, the fact that interest rates have skyrocketed, and we know from our own property insurance for the city and personally, that the price of insurance has gone sky high. And those are serious concerns in getting the job done properly and the way we had hoped it would be with 2 towers. But we already compromised to say, all right, 500 apartments in 2 towers. Now we're saying 400. I'm not crazy about it. I didn't like the idea of above-ground parking, but looking at the designs that they provided, the parking is not visible from Osceola. It's built into, the structure essentially, and the parking doesn't concern me as much, and I understand, the troubles they had with the water levels, whatever it's called, that make it impossible to go too deep with the underground parking. So these are all compromises. But I do think it is better to go along with the project that will bring some much-needed life downtown and spur other people to bring their projects downtown rather than completely abandon it. I mean, this is the, the first step in seizing control of our downtown back from Scientology. And I think this is important. We spent a fortune on the park and the amphitheater. We want to have more people living downtown. And we've already heard from other developers that they want to bring projects in just a couple of blocks away from this. And I think, as disappointing as it is to see those changes, we are getting something worthwhile from it. It's not what we expected, but and the income from the apartments will be less than we were expecting, but not disastrously so, and it's better than zero. I think it's better than starting over from scratch right now. But, this is the first time we've had to talk about it. I may be in the minority, I don't know. But after my initial shock, looking at the reasons that Gotham is coming forward requesting these changes, I think it's still a really terrific project. And I will point out, the one thing that people really sparked on when I was talking to them about it was the beer garden. Apparently the beer garden is still in it. For those folks out there worried about that, I don't drink. But I think we still have a worthwhile project here. But this is the first time I've heard you talk about clawbacks. I'd be really interested to see how those negotiations go. Because as I said, right now, interest rates are up, property insurance is up, and we are making compromises because of that. I would like to see if those things come down dramatically, or somewhat dramatically, that we can, get something back from our compromises.
Thank you. I just wanted to answer, is that what's being cited, insurance, interest rates, construction costs, I mean, Gotham touts themselves as being in business for 100 years, 5 generations. These are things that vary all the time in construction. And I think that they, perhaps could plan on that. We all know about the insurance struggles here in Clearwater, or in Florida, and we know about interest rates, ebb and flow. And I would also say that, these 3 things, insurance, interest rates, and construction costs, I don't see D'Annunzio coming forward and asking for extra gives. And I have problems with those things. I don't think that that's enough with their experience, and that doesn't move the needle enough, and it certainly doesn't answer the fundamental question of, this is not what voters voted for.
Okay, thank you. They said this was going to be easy when I came back. Anyway, first I want to remind everybody that we have not culminated in negotiations. And I think that depending on what we do or don't do tonight, obviously there's going to be some more discussions, and what they put on the table doesn't mean that's necessarily what's going to happen. I also want to remind folks that over the years, we put a lot of projects through from 99 to 2005. Nothing went through as was originally planned. The bridge was delayed. Now, they're all for different reasons. It was overpriced, but we got it done. Beach Walk was delayed for 4 years, and the price rose dramatically. We had a referendum that failed in the early 2000s that would have renovated downtown, and it's a good thing it did, because it would have never gotten built because the economy collapsed right after that. We would have never gotten any of that built. So things are never exactly how they were originally presented. I'm going to save most of my comments to the end, but, at the end of the day, we want to honor the intent of the voters who overwhelmingly approved this project. But we have to balance that with what's in the best financial interest of the city. I'm going to steal a line from our esteemed attorney. The end of it is from him, not the beginning. We waited over 20 years for something like this, a catalytic project downtown that's already, as we've heard, had other people interested in putting apartments and other buildings downtown because of the park, and this will be a key component of it. We cannot let perfect be the enemy of good, and I still think this proposal, after we negotiate further, is still a good proposal. So with that said, I would like to call up, because this is my first time to see these folks, the applicants, to hear a little bit from them about what they're proposing and ask a few questions of them.
Good evening, Katie Cole, 600 Cleveland Street, Suite 800, Clearwater, with the law firm of Hill Ward Henderson, representing the development team, the Gotham organization, and the D'Annunzio group. I wanted to start by saying there's been a lot of stress expressed over the past several weeks on this, but I would hope instead we would see the excitement surrounding the bluffs, because that's what's brought us here to you tonight. That's what made me call Mr. Marvellis in January and say, oh no, there's a problem. We are committed to figuring out this problem. We need more time to do it. 9 months ago, the city selected the Team of Gotham organization and D'Annunzio group to construct the largest private development project in downtown Clearwater, and these organizations are committed to doing that. They entered into a partnership by responding to this RFP, which did not have any of these details. And the council selected them because they were the most qualified, with financial backing, able to build the project. And you knew that if they said they were moving forward to build the project, that you would end up with a project. Since then, the city, the residents, the development team worked toward a successful referendum. And then in November, the development team mobilized with all of its professional consultants for due diligence work on the 2 downtown sites. Geotechnical studies, environmental studies, soil borings, construction estimates, survey work, title review, refining architectural schemes, discussions with Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo, insurance estimates, market research, not just their own internal market research, engaging Greystar for what actually would look like a stabilized project, working with Gensler on what the market research is and how the Clearwater market differs significantly from St. Petersburg and Tampa. The development team that did this simultaneously for 2 sites, simultaneously in 60 days. This was a huge undertaking. Based upon this work, they came to 2 conclusions. The first is that the proposed hotel, a proven use in the hottest tourist market on the west coast of Florida, would not require significant changes to move forward. There were still concerns with respect to financing. There's still concerns with respect to escalating construction costs, but the scale of that project is one that is small enough, relative, $80 million or so, instead of $250 million, that those were attainable and reasonable for the development team to move forward and continue on its work to the extent that the architects, engineers, landscape architects, and surveyors have put together the full development package that actually I received while I was sitting here tonight to review for submittal next week for the city's DRC site plan review process. The second conclusion was that there was a significant $80 million gap in what the estimates were from July of 2022 to January of 2023. In the presentation provided to Mr. Margolis, it's part of your agenda item, on page 11, it outlines that gap. It talks about how to close it. So in January, the development team said, how can we close an $80 million gap? Because most people, that would be the end of the project. That's a huge gap to fill. And so instead, Gotham and D'Annunzio went to the architects and said, and the contractors, two very reputable construction companies, and said, what could we do to make this different? So they came up with a new scheme for one tower, because 2 towers is expensive, raising one level of parking out from underground, not both, which shortens the construction time frame, shortens the lease-up duration, does some value engineering, and that resulted in a savings of about $56 million. So then it was a matter of how to close the balance of the gap. And that's what we brought to the city manager, Mr. Margolis, in March, was how do we close the balance of the gap? It's a significant change in the program, and we appreciate that. It's still the largest project in a downtown area constructed. I think we were just looking, Mr. Margolis and I were looking at some of the St. Pete projects that were approved, most of which the largest projects are condominiums and not multifamily, and still 400 units is significant. So maintaining the parking contribution, and then from there, the purchase price mortgage and trying to subordinate and put that out, and Mr. Margolis had a very good explanation of the benefits of that. After that, we raised our hands and said, we still need help, and as our partner in the city, what are options? The pedestrian bridge was an easy way financially on a ledger to close the gap. But we heard from Mr. Delk and others that that was really an important project, and that was not something that the city wanted to do, and were there other things? And again, this development team is saying, we are your partners. We are looking to work together to find a way to close this gap and put a shovel in the ground and build a project. Mr. Pickett and Mr. D'Annunzio are here tonight because they believe in this project, they believe in Imagine Clearwater, and they believe in downtown Clearwater and the Bluffs. These conversations are never easy between a buyer and a seller, and they're certainly not easy when the only place to have the conversation is on the dais. But we appreciate Mr. Margolis' work over the past 9 months, and especially over the past 5 weeks. And I think at the Vote Yes celebration night, I think we had this conversation, but we've had lots of Saturday conversations. Easter weekend we spent on the phone. He didn't include all of those on his list of meetings that we've had with you. But Mr. Margolis has been more than generous in his time in working through each one of these issues. As he said, Gotham has provided a variety of information, but it was almost as if too much information might have been too much. We have spreadsheets that we've made available to Mr. Margolis that show the calculations from July, the calculations from January, the calculations from March. We have cost estimates from July, from January, from March. We have insurance estimates from July, from January, from March. We have all of that information. We've provided a spreadsheet that is interactive and able to be changed. A PDF version of one of the original estimates was in your packet, but provided that so Mr. Ravens and your development team can work with us to say, well, if this number changes, how does that impact everything else? So we appreciate that this is not a conversation anyone wanted to do. And let me assure you, if it was financially feasible, these are developers. Of course they would want to build 600 units. Of course they would want to lease up 600 units over the long haul. But what they want most of all is to put a shovel in the ground, start construction, and build a project in downtown Clearwater. And we're here to work together to find a way to do that. So Mr. Pickett and Mr. D'Annunzio are here tonight, happy to answer questions. Mr. Pickett will do a much better job at the financial analysis than I can, but I'm also happy to talk about some of the conversations Mr. Margolis and I have had, some of the theories that we've thrown out, some of the other options with respect to the subordination, potential clawback, but I don't want to use that phrase because that comes with a different definition in the world of corporate financing, but those types of things as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Cole? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned, it's my understanding it's 2 levels of above-ground parking. You said 1?
No, I said 1 level of underground, bringing 1 level up, and then based on our discussions, Mr. Margolis asked if we could add additional parking and increase that parking ratio, which would require a smaller, we don't have schematics yet, because that was just something that came up a couple weeks ago, which would put more parking on a 2nd level of parking above. So went from 2 levels underground with a little bit above ground to 1 level.
But is that all covered?
It would all be enclosed. And in talking with Ms. Clayton, I know that Mr. Margolis talked about being screened from Osceola, but I think Ms. Clayton would agree that your code would, and as the development team would probably necessitate enclosing it all around, so it's not visible from the park either.
So how would you answer to voters for the referendum question that was as specific as like 158 Key Hotel and approximately 600, market rate apartments? How do you, what's your explanation to residents that this is not that? I mean, aside from the hotel.
It's not that, right? It's 400 units and not approximately 600. Right. But the referendum question was the best description of a vision. It actually, look at the ordinance that it actually authorized. The ordinance itself and the charter doesn't dictate that. And certainly what we have a vision for is the most significant project to come to downtown Clearwater ever.
So they voted for a vision and not at approximately 600? They voted for a vision, is the answer that we would say? We were voting for a vision, and when we went and showed you all the marketing materials with the bridge and 2 towers,
I think
it's a vision, but it might not be that.
I think we were voting, would we have wanted it to be that? Of course, councilman member, I mean, of course, but do I think that it is misleading to have a significant downtown project that will bring over $300 million investment into downtown and 400 residential units? No, I think that what people were voting for was downtown redevelopment, and that's what they're getting.
Anything else from Ms. Cole? Yes.
I don't have necessarily a question, but I kind of want to give you my take on this whole thing. And Katie, I'm a retired contractor. I mean, I tell everybody I'm retired, but my family keeps me busy. And I see firsthand the cost inflation going up on building materials. I mean, I've been helping my son with his house, and it's just, no way a year ago I could have, and I did, I put a budget together and it's, already gone through. We haven't really added anything, just the same thing we're doing cost a lot more than the original budget. So I see that. I've been getting a lot of emails, which I'm certain all of us have, and not very nice emails, but on both sides, not just one side. I mean, both sides of it. And I tell you the truth, I've been going back and forth in my mind about this because when Mr. Margolis first told me back in January, my first thing was, nope, that's it. We're not going to do that. Then I started thinking, well, the other people that responded to the RFP that had smaller amounts, I mean, if we went back to them, they'd be cutting their projects back as well. So nobody's going to give us the same thing because everybody was in that time period last year was different than the time period this year. And the bait and switch, I get that a lot, bait and switch. Well, if you were to tell me you were going to build something a week ago and then you started this week with something different, that's a bait and switch, but a year has gone by. And you've had a due diligence process from the very get-go. because you needed, and you just explained it, you needed to have the coring samples, you didn't know about the hydrostatic pressure underneath. I was thinking it was on a bluff, and no problem, you can dig down, because, yeah, but still, you had the hydrostatic pressure where the parking garage was, per space was going up into the 80, even above $1,000 per space. I understand that. But this afternoon, if you were to ask me this, I would have said, you know what, if we were to all be on the same page and say, look, we're not going to buy this. We did tell the public about 600 units, and so and I was all set to say this afternoon, because then I started thinking about, well, where do we go from here? Well, here's where we go from here. Another RFP, and it's got to be done quickly, because we have to have another referendum, and that quickest we can have a referendum is next March, a year from now. I mean, assuming we have a successful RFP immediately. If we miss that, then it's another almost a year to the next November election, presidential election, for a referendum. So why would we want to throw away everything we've been looking at so far? I know it's been downscaled. I know we have to put in money. As the mayor was saying, city projects are like this. You have a vision, and that a lot of times it doesn't come out. I remember Cleveland Street, when we built Cleveland Street, people were saying this is never going to happen. Well, then it happened, and as soon as the shovels got in the ground, everybody's complaining about the dirt. But we didn't build it exactly like the plan showed, because we had to value engineer it as we went through it. I'd hate to see this project. One of the things I did like was the high density. Okay, we still got 400 units, which is big. The other thing was Gotham, a proven developer, builder that has financing, that has billions in financing with Goldman Sachs or Wells Fargo or whatever they're going with. But I understand they've got to meet a certain yield on cost. And, they met it last summer, but as insurance rates and everything went up, that's where the shortfall comes. So I understand that. So anyway, I had to say that because of my waffling back and forth. But I'm sitting here now thinking I don't want to throw that away and start over and be 2 years or a year, and we don't even know what it's going to be. I mean, we may have something less than what you all are still offering. So I think that I'm probably going to ask that we move forward in the negotiations and see what we can work out. That's kind of where I am right now.
Katie, you've seen me downtown all the time. You know that I've been very passionate about downtown. And I also acknowledge that patience is not a virtue that I possess. That's how I explain all the boards I'm on. I feel like if I could get in there, I'll do things faster. And I'm very cognizant of that, of my emotional stake in this. I really want this to work. But I found there's so much to consider when deciding how to proceed. And I'm left with so many unanswered questions. Questions like, how are the citizens going to perceive if we just barrel through? Should we consider the fact that with the demolished City Hall, the activated park, the activated amphitheater, as well as a parking structure already in the works, will it look more attractive for future developers? How will our decision impact future negotiations, future referendums, and relationships with future partners? And I don't have an answer to that, and that makes me very uncomfortable, because this is not the first time that I've made a difficult decision. Actually, it's almost every 2 weeks. never catch a break. But this situation is very unique because it's the first time that we've had a referendum, and the citizens have been very clear on how they feel about a very specific question. And so what makes this decision of paramount of importance is that I cannot ignore that fact. And I take that very seriously. And although, again, I'm rather impatient to see downtown truly successful, I don't want to make a decision based on fear or my impatience. And so what I really would like is that the city receives due diligence, some opportunity that was given to you guys. I want the same. If I'm going to ask the citizens to be flexible regarding the referendum, I need to be sure that I understand completely what that financial stake is. So just like you requested an extension of due diligence, I would like the same opportunity, not incredibly extensive, but just enough time that I can look citizens in the eye and say, I truly believe that this is good. Can you be flexible regarding the referendum? So that's what I'm asking.
Okay. I think we should hear from the public. Okay, anyone from the public would like to speak to this item?
You can do it afterwards.
Hi, my name is Mike Mastrosario. I'm a citizen of Clearwater, and you can see what I think about it. I worked very hard to make sure that the people understood what it was. A lot of people didn't care if it was 600 apartments, 500 apartments, or 400 apartments. By the way, I was home watching this whole council meeting. I had to get out of my chair and come down here because it's important to me. So I'm one of those voters that you were asking, what do the voters think? You're not going to please every voter all the time. There's going to be things that I don't like. But that's one thing that I do like, and I will tell you this much. People don't care about how many. They want to see what Mr. Bunker said. We need a change going on here. Mr. Unk said that the fact that it might not be the best, but it's good. And we have to take that and move forward. And so I know a lot of you personally, but I want you to really realize that the timing is now. These gentlemen are risking a lot. The city's risking a lot, but we're going to lose a lot more if we do not move forward now, because you're already talking another 4 years before the project's done. And if we go back to more choices, more referendums, whatever else, it could be another 20 years before it gets done. So please, think about what's already been done. Think about what the voters told you. You can't go back and get the vote over again, and that percentage of people might not drop that much. But we need to think of what we need to do for the future. And the future downtown, the future of Clearwater, is make it happen now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
David Lewis, and I live at Water's Edge, 331 Cleveland Street. I also came from watching at home and running over here.
Live next door.
Because I don't want to miss this opportunity. And I'm running for #1 fan club member of Councilmember Buckman's group. But I think, honestly, you're wrong about this one. The gap here is not the gap in just the money. The gap is the time that we take as a public entity to live up to the expectations we're asking developers to present to us. So I think it was like March when we started this process, and then it was November when we had the referendum, and now it's months after that. And if we don't grab this opportunity at this point in time, it's going to be years more, because you all have the obligation to make the right decision. Don't send everything back on another referendum. I think people will understand this. We're getting a major apartment building constructed. Secondly, after having a breakfast with Dunstan D'Annunzio and understanding more about the economics involved here, I mean, when this deal first came up, I was getting 1.25% at best on my money in a bank.
Now I'm getting 5.1% as of last week for jumbo CDs. The situation changes. This group, D'Annunzio and Gotham, could effectuate this deal in a matter of 60 days, but we have to go through the votings and the referendum process that delays it all. The delay is not on them, it's on us, and it's going to continue to delay every future attempt we to get to do this. This is the best project, and Water's Edge people are delighted with this change, absolutely delighted. They didn't want to walk in the back of the building, and they didn't want 2 towers. They wanted 1 tower, and the tower is going to be farther away from Water's Edge. So virtually 100% of the people in Water's Edge support this change, just so you know.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Councilmember here, Michael Woodall, been a lifelong resident of Florida, 20 years here in the city. Start off, this is what the plan the city residents voted on. You know, I've had extensive conversations with a few of the council members, and it consisted of the government promoting the original plan. That's what y'all went around to all the town hall meetings doing, was promoting this plan with 600 units and this and that. I mean, it's gone from this to then. You know, if you're going to ask for an RFP, and a 30-day RFP at that, how many times has that happened? Most city governments or governments are 56 days RFPs. I've never seen a 30-day RFP, and I was in construction for 35 years. I actually built Water's Edge. 2 floors underground of parking. What does this say to the other companies that was bidding on this project? These other developers. They have the same thing that the D'Annunzio and Gotham Group are proposing now. Is that to say that they come in and we're going to just give them the Taj Mahal, and then after do this, we're going to come back and say, no, we're going to give you this? And I heard a remark, it's not the best, but is it good? Well, is good enough good enough for Biden and Clearwater, or is it the best? So, from what I can tell from the new proposal, it looks like taxpayers are going to be on the hook, and I did some quick math back there, 40 million. That's quick. I mean, that was just some quick numbers, probably going to be 45. And it started at 22. Some of the other developers were at 28, 30. Again, what is this saying if we're going to send out RFPs from the city? Interest rates and insurance. We all knew interest rates were going up last year when this thing went through. The Fed said that they were going to raise it again. So that should have been factored in already. Interest rates in Florida, they go up and down every cycle. I mean, we're in a cycle where it's going to keep climbing, and it's going to drop again. It is what it is. In 20 years of being here, I've seen it happen. Now that the price group has changed, would it not be feasible just to put it back out for a 60 or 90-day RFP? And let's see what these other projects will come in as, to get the best that we can possibly get to downtown. There was a few things that I heard that I don't want to get into right now. I just ask the council take its time, research this, and do what's right for the city and downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Dr. Raftery, I was here once before. I read about this earlier this week and did not realize it would come up as quickly as it did to the council, but nevertheless it is here. The first point I heard about that I'd like to address is the referendum. I supported the referendum. I supported the development. And my experience has been with the citizens and residents that I talk to, and I live with one, is they are not necessarily in favor of 600 apartments or 400 apartments or this or that. They are not in favor of development going forward, or they are in favor of the development going forward. So my take on that is that the original vision, the original plan was 600 units. We all voted for that. We thought that's what would happen. But things have changed. And now there's adjustments that have been made that have caused that vote that said we want development to occur to still occur, even though it's just 400 apartments. The other thing I'd like to say is I believe that when we voted on this, and the council voted on this, and we engaged with the developers, it is not seller versus buyer, an adversarial relationship. To me, it's a partnership. I don't think they sat back and said, now how can we take advantage of the city of Clearwater as we go forward with this development? I don't think that was their attitude at all. I think they had an $80 million gap that they talked about, and they went back first to their people and said, how can we reduce that gap? That tells me that their intention was to do whatever necessary from their side to move forward. And I think they've demonstrated that. They're giving us an option to consider that will allow the project to go forward. And with respect to your roles as council members and voters on this project, you're going to get input from the citizens. Good input, bad input. And every one of us that made decisions, be it in business or government, we like to have those decisions very clear. 15 were for it, 6 were against it. I know where I'm going to vote. Unfortunately, tonight, that's probably not where you're going to be. You have both voices given to you. But you are the ones that are going to have to make the decision. And I would say the key motivation for that decision should be what is in the best interest of Clearwater. We're moving forward. We're making transformational changes to Clearwater, and this is a key part of it. I don't think we should back away from it. There will be some financial obligations that will have to be looked at, but the fundamental decision is, do we go forward, or do we once again stop and go back? And I say, let us go forward and address the issues as they come up to the best that we can develop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Good evening, Councilman. It's Chris again. Sorry about earlier. I forgot to turn the page.
No problem.
But yeah, I'm here to express that I am against the revised development plans presented. Okay, I do believe here in Clearwater we do need some change, even if this project is not the most appealing. I do remember another project that had actually looked really good. Can't remember the name, but I do remember. I will say we can always hope that this project will lead to more opportunities and improvements in the future. But my main concern, I would say, as a taxpayer here, is that we're not taking the financial burden for this. Okay, so I would say thank you for your time and consideration, council members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill Johnson. I've been in this room for a whole year, hearing stories about this, addressing the 600 units. As I recall, and I don't have the papers here, I thought it was 600 or about 600, but there was a thought about it maybe being 500 units. So that number alone doesn't cause me a great deal of concern. One of the questions I have is this deal that you're talking about the last due diligence change that will happen on this project? Or will something else happen if interest rates still go up? It's just a question. My main concern, and I haven't heard enough information about this, I don't think, about how this change affects the quality of the active edge that made this design so attractive to me, that would get people on the edge of the project that would be interacting with downtown, but would get the downtown to interact with the park and the water's edge, where we need to have another active, vital group of people there every day. And I'd like to know more about the retail effect that would be in the base of the apartment complex. Is the parking going to diminish that space that was going to be kind of a retail main street that would walk out toward the water? My friend, Mr. Lillison, doesn't like the walkway. I think the bridge walkway
would be really great in ensuring that more people are coming down there and just hanging out there. So, a couple thoughts. Thank you very much for allowing me to share.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else from the public?
Good evening, Mayor Ongst.
Good evening.
Welcome to the council members, Ms. Poirier, Mr. Margolis, staff. As I've listened to the conversation, a lot seems to really, I think, also deal around the financials and the information as related to the give-backs, clawbacks, which I was glad to hear about. The topics mentioned had to do with insurance, inflation, interest rates. I know the team that was selected to do this project brought together, if you would, a partnership of expertise in order to get this done. They had financial people, they had construction people, they had management people. All that brought expertise to the project. So you weren't just buying the project, you were buying the talent, if you would, that was coming along with that. It was mentioned about inflation, which has been no mystery for the last year and a half. We all know that it's been up, and anybody who's following the trends, even though, yes, specific products are higher, is that inflation is coming down. And part of the process of doing that, has been expressed by the Federal Reserve, is raising interest rates. It's been no surprise for a year and a half, that interest rates were going up, and they were going to consistent go up until we saw a movement in terms of inflation. So with financial people that basically follow these trends, it should be no question about the fact that interest rates were going to be higher. And a project manager would have factored some of those in to the extent that they would have a budget A, a budget B, and a budget C to see how those go. So that's inflation and interest rates. Insurance, I got to give them, though, that was another big surprise that really basically jumped up about October, November, December. But it was very clear at those points what was going on, and we were looking to the state legislature, hopefully, to do something about it, which I don't think happened, okay? Now, interest rates, quite frankly, may be coming down, because we now see unemployment starting to go up, which was the expected factor of the Federal Reserve, is yes, we may have higher unemployment, but what does higher unemployment bring? Lower labor costs, because there are more people now on the market. So I would only say that as you factor in these concerns, and especially the clawback provision that was mentioned, I can very easily see, and anybody listening to financials, is that we may very easily see interest rates coming down in the near future, and yet the pre-work is through the end of 2024, if I heard correct, which means construction, per se, would happen after that. So that's a full year and a half or more away as we factor in these extra costs. So I thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the public care to speak on this item? Okay. I'm going to use the privilege and speak first since I'm the newbie up here. Fortunately, I'm retired, and I had a lot of time the last few days to research this, which fortunately I have a lot of connections that can intelligently talk about something like this. And from what I'm told, it doesn't matter if it was these folks or any developer anywhere in this country, they'd be in the same boat right now coming forward if they would have won the referendum. So I'm comfortable for the most part from what I'm hearing. I think we need to do more due diligence. This has been set up here. Interest rates have gone up dramatically. We had a 200-year storm in Sanibel and Fort Myers. 200-year storm. I know because I owned a house down there. And it's a mess. And insurance rates went through the roof. Will that happen again? Who knows? Hopefully not. But those are things that were under no one's control, and they just happened. As far as referendums and what this says or doesn't say, I've always lived under the precipice that there are no absolutes. Each and every individual item has its own merits and things that you need to look at. I don't believe that this is setting a bad precedent if we move forward and at the end of the day, after due diligence, accept this proposal, or a proposal yet to be ironed out, because I don't believe it's ironed out yet. So I'm not worried about that. I also have heard almost nothing about the 2 towers to 1 tower. In fact, as the gentleman from Water's Edge said, I've heard a lot of people say that's going to help us with view corridors. It's not going to be as wide. It's more attractive. The ground parking is covered by residential or retail, excuse me. Now, I also want to clarify, Ms. Cole or one of the gentlemen, from what I understand, the retail has not diminished. The top floor was considered retail, but that is, anyway, if you would come up real quick, just to answer that question, that it's going to be the same on the ground floor as it was in the original plan. Is that correct for both this and for the hotel, for the?
Yes, Katie Cole. It has reduced some, so
Okay.
yes, but there was a significant amount of retail on the rooftop of the towers that was, it was classified as retail in the approvals in the event the developer in the future wanted to use it as retail. But there would be a slight reduction. That said, the only thing that was provided to the city and the only thing the team has done to date are very crude schematics to be able to do these estimates and determine. So there's about 19,000 square feet, 15,000 to 19,000 shown on this. So I think that's all still to be determined.
Okay. Yeah. So that was another question that I had gotten. And again, I've had very little feedback as far as people saying this is the wrong thing. I believe that the time has come for us to move forward, and because I haven't done this for a while, I've made myself a few notes. If you indulge me, I'm going to read them now. For nearly 2 decades, the city has struggled to revitalize downtown Clearwater as it faces challenges and unprecedented private property purchases from buyers with little to no expressed plans for the sites. We all agree we want a visionary project that will seamlessly blend with Imagine Clearwater and benefit every single resident. Investing a few more months of due diligence because the market changed, in my opinion, is a wise investment. At the end of the day, we will make a decision that is in the best financial interest of the city, and then one that I hope will lead to a diverse, vibrant, and sustainable downtown. Our goal has never changed. We want a diverse, vibrant, and self-sustainable downtown, as I just mentioned. What has changed are the market conditions. And again, I don't believe, it doesn't matter who was here in front of us, these things would have changed. And I've seen that in the past with previous projects that I mentioned in my previous tenure. This time will allow us the ability to do our due diligence. And at the end of the day, we want to honor the intent of the voters who will overwhelmingly approve this project. But we will balance this with what's in the best financial interest of the city. And as I said before, we've waited 20 years, and we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. So those are my comments, and I would like to hear from the rest of the council. And let's start left to right. Mr. Albritton.
Well, as I said before, I struggle with this, but, you know, I don't think we could get a better, at this point in time, a better offer on what it needs to be done. And, you know, this is still a great project, 400 units downtown. If we can get going on this, it'll show that we actually can do something in Clearwater instead of just talking about it. So I'm for moving forward with the due diligence and have staff move forward with this project.
Thank you. Sure.
I just want to have the same opportunity that Gotham had, and that's just a little more time for due diligence. I'm not comfortable forging ahead at this point. I need more time.
Thank you. Mr. Bunker, Vice Mayor.
I think we should go ahead. Due diligence is always good, but I believe this is an important project to get moving. Look at our discussions on City Hall. How many back and forths have there been about that over the years? We can't do that with this project as well. We finally have something that is a solid, good project that's going to bring life to the downtown at an important time when we need to do that. back for another vote? Well, why would people even bother to vote the next time if they vote it once and we toss it all away? You know, how are we going to get that enthusiasm out there? How are we going to get people to wear shirts that say, yes again for Clearwater? So I would like us to move forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Beckman.
I appreciate those comments, I do. But I think, you know, comments about I've never seen a project that ended up the way it started and all that stuff, that might be true. But this is a referendum that voters voted on specifically. It's not just, we okayed this development for this project. This is a vote. There were PACs that spent money, and people went out and heavily lobbied for this. I went out and gave presentations in favor of this as well and showed the pictures. And to be perfectly frank and honest, a lot of the feedback, well, not a lot, but every presentation I got, there was questions about the parking ratio. There was questions about the density. There were concerns about 600 units right down there and the traffic. And I get that. I was concerned about that as well. So do I think we would get pushback on reducing the density? I don't think we'd get a bunch of people packed in here that says, please make it 600 down there. I really want 600. But the fact that we went and sold it as something that it's not bothers me. That voters voted on it. It's a charter. It's a change to the charter from highest bidder to this specific developer. Gotham and D'Annunzio, 158 Key Hotel, you know, approximately 600, and now we're going back to 400. To me, I think that's too big. So if we're sending the message, you know, as part of our comments is to go out and do due diligence, I'm okay with that. We can, you know, extend the time frame. We're only giving guidance here. We're not voting on anything. But I'll tell you, the message that you're sending right now is I want this to work. And that's great. I want something to work as well. But when you put that language out there and all those cards in the developer's hands, they know that we're up here salivating for this. And I want to make sure that financially we know exactly what the city is in for, what that cost is going to be, what taxpayers are going to give up, and what the concessions are. And, you know, granted, if we reduce the density, that's fine. But if the bridge is gone, if, you know, if they're getting their $17 million from the parking fund, the same amount of money they were going to get when they had 600 parking spaces, and now they're down to 400 parking spaces, or 410 or 20 or whatever, and they still get the 17 million, plus they want more, plus they want this deferred mortgage that puts us at risk. Those are a lot of things that fall on our shoulders for due diligence financially. And so, you know, I'm not up here championing 600. I want 600. That's not the point. The point is that we're sending the message. I don't want us to send the message we want this at all costs and at all taxpayers' costs, because that's what I fear. As we go down this pathway for another 3 months of due diligence, we've invested that much more time. We continue to have conversations and push and pull. And 3 months from now, we may be up here and they may say, oh my gosh, you know, we've invested all summer in this. We got to make it work. We got to make it work. Let's just write a bigger check. We got to get something started. And that's what I'm afraid of. And so I'm going to be hawking on the numbers. I am. And I think we need to be glaringly transparent with taxpayers about what that means financially.
Okay. In all due respect, the library was also a referendum, and the Library Foundation, we decided to build it 93,000 square feet instead of 66, which we could afford. They backed out of the commitment a year later, and no one screamed about that. So there are precedents, and you know, and again, with all due respect, I'm going to also harp on the numbers. This is not a done deal. They talked about whatever that term is, I would call it sweeteners. If insurance rates come down in a couple of years and interest rates come down, I don't expect the numbers that I saw today to be what we end up with. So I'm very confident that our attorney and Mrs. Poirier or whoever else is going to work with him in the negotiations will get to a point that we're comfortable with. And if by August 31st, which I believe is the recommendation, we're not, then we'll shake hands and go our separate ways. No one here, especially me, is saying that we want these guys so bad we're going to give them whatever they want. That's not the case. And I want that to be perfectly clear on my end. That is not the case. That's not how I do business. That's not how I've done business. I've always looked for the best deal for the citizens and also for the parties that we're dealing with. It's a partnership. So that's what I intend to hopefully, now that I'm in the process, which I wasn't in until a couple of days ago, see through. So, Mr. Margolis, what would you recommend? August 31st, I think, was your recommendation. If that's the will of the majority of the council to advise you, is that what you would recommend?
Certainly, if that's the will of the council, although I did not put a specific recommendation in there because I did not want to, number one, unduly influence the conversation that I know that you guys really needed to have with each other. I do think that's probably a wise decision for a lot of reasons. One reason I think that's a good decision is simply because more information is always better than less information. Right now, we're being asked to have this conversation at a time when, as Ms. Cole pointed out, we have just had hours and hours and hours of trying to compress the data and compress those conversations into something that is too voluminous and too complex to fully digest within that time period. I think it's helpful for both us and the developers if we have, as Councilmember Teixeira pointed out, the same due diligence that they did. So I think that's one reason. The other reason is because we would take that time to bring in an outside expert to evaluate some of these issues. A lot of the things that we've been discussing with Gotham are issues that staff internally are comfortable evaluating, but some of them are not. I'm not ashamed to say that I've never run an apartment complex. That's not my business, right? I'm here to advise local government. How many apartment complexes do we manage? Outside of affordable housing complexes, which are very different, we don't have a lot of interaction in terms of the private equity financing, that world that they occupy. Gensler performing market research, what is the erosion of rent because of the way that rent stabilizes or increases or decreases over the years. Gotham has provided me everything I've asked for, but that doesn't mean that I, or candidly anyone on city staff, is the best person to give the city the best possible information and the best possible recommendation as to what is the smartest path forward for Clearwater. I don't know what that outcome is going to be, but I do believe that it's best for this council to hear that information before making a decision. The other reason I think it's beneficial to extend due diligence is because it does provide more of an opportunity for voters to weigh in. As Councilmember Albritton pointed out, you've already heard from both sides, some people, much more assertively than others, and this was on a very compressed time frame. So there will be more of an opportunity for citizens to weigh in. Keep in mind that if the council ultimately ends up moving forward with any sort of amendments to a development agreement, that process alone is 2 public hearings. So it is a publicly noticed hearing in front of the Community Development Board and then a second one in front of this council. So nothing happens quickly in government, even under the best of circumstances. So there's definitely going to provide additional opportunities for public input. That said, one thing I do want the council to be aware of, if we do extend the due diligence period, which I do think is a wise course of action, it's going to be a long 4 months. It's going to be rough because you are going to hear it from both sides, probably day in and day out for the next few months. You are probably going to hear more input than you would have envisioned, and you will not have any answers to give immediately because it's going to take time for the manager and I to bring in an outside firm, evaluate the data, analyze everything. And so my advice to the council is if we'd like to go down this path, which I do think is a good one, it will take patience on our side. It's also going to take a lot of discipline on our side. I would advise the council to say as little as possible during that time because there's just nothing helpful that we can really say during that process. So those would be my thoughts.
And what can you say if you don't have the details?
Exactly.
And that was, you made one point, and I apologize, I forgot, but trust but verify. I trust the information I'm getting, but if we bring a third party in to work with our professionals, we might find there's a few red herrings. We might find it's 100% accurate. Everybody else would be under the same boat. We don't know what we're going to find. But I think the way things have transpired and how quickly it came about, and then we have to get this on tonight because they did not want to default. And from what I understand, the default for them would be a death knell for their business because they do public-private partnerships pretty much solely. So once an agreement is met, if agreement is met and we move forward, I'm very confident that this will get done. But that's putting the cart before the horse. So it sounds like, yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I'd like you to work some milestones in there as well as to, Katie was saying that she was ready to go to DRC or to, start putting that in. I'd like to get some milestones in place so we could also talk about that and we know what's going to happen when.
Yeah, understood. So the current, the current agreement has a very fixed milestone for pre-development. That fact will remain, although the actual date will probably have to fluctuate based on this. The biggest question for council, which we can discuss on the dais if you like, or we can discuss through one-on-ones, is whether you'd like to see construction timelines. Now, that was not an issue up until now, because the way the agreement was originally structured, Gotham was going to have to invest more significantly up front, including the purchase price. So the theory at the time is that when they've sunk all of those costs in pre-development, including the purchase price, the economics of this will automatically propel them forward because they will have the carrying cost of the property, the purchase price, and all of those sunk costs. We were also dealing, of course, at that time with some major variations in the construction market in terms of materials uncertainty, still lingering effects from COVID, et cetera. Now that a lot of that has subsided when it comes to COVID, now that they are proposing a delayed payment of 5 to 10 years in terms of when they have to invest that capital for us, I do think construction timelines would be reasonable, and they have advertised it themselves in terms of what they've said in their presentation, and I think it's a great point, which is that one of the benefits of moving forward with an amended project is a significantly accelerated construction timeline. I think that's a great point, but I also think it's very reasonable for us to hold them to that. And so if that is the desire from council, I think that's a very reasonable ask under these circumstances.
Any other comments? All right, do we have, yes, ma'am.
Do you feel we need the 4 months? It can't be bumped up to 3 or anything like that, just to expedite things, or no? You need the full 4 months?
I don't know. I would rather have the time and not need it than need it and not have it. My fear would be we may very well be able to do it faster, but there's a couple things we have to look at that could slow it down a little bit. None of it is Gotham's fault, but one of them is just on the procurement level. We have to kind of deal with our purchasing code and navigate that aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that it's very likely that the consultant we hire will need to have sub-consultants involved in this. It's, sounds silly almost to say it out loud, but it makes sense because there are very different specialties involved. The person who's an expert as a general contractor and is an expert in construction is not necessarily going to be the expert in other aspects that we would want them to evaluate. So it's likely there's going to be one overall consultant that the city will bring in, and they will likely have to bring in at least 2, probably 2, maybe 3 subspecialists to work with them. So my hope would be that we could bring that back sooner to the council, but instead of taking the risk and having a last-minute scramble, I'd rather give us a comfortable amount of time. And I think that'll be helpful for Gotham too, because we have heard so much feedback from them about the dangers that the mayor pointed out of being in default of a public partnership. I think this gives them some breathing room as well, so that they know that there's no danger of being in default over the next few months, and that just gives us time to work through what is admittedly a complex transaction.
Okay. Anything else? All right, do we have a consensus to instruct the attorney to continue discussing this? Yes. Okay, everyone? All right. You've got your marching orders. Good luck.
Very good. We'll get started. Manager and I will get started on that, and we'll work on bringing in the consultant.
Okay. Council comments. Councilmember Beckman, you want to start?
Sure. Just want to say thank you to people who show up and engage in our civic process and have their voices be heard. I didn't prepare a whole bunch, but that's the standard message. I really appreciate everybody who's engaged and shares their feedback. Yeah, have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
I hope I didn't offend too many people by taking the knee when Pat Harney, the PR representative for Scientology, came to do the invocation tonight. I am not trying to upset Scientologists. I feel that I've been fighting for you over the 20 years that I've been talking about Scientology abuses. I am intrigued to see that in the past, when Pat has come here, she has read an essay by L. Ron Hubbard and then just tacked on amen to the end of it, which I say doesn't really turn anything into a prayer. But this time she actually dug up a prayer for total freedom, which is often used there. And I'm always amused by the fact that rather than a God or whatever, it says, may the author of the universe enable all men to reach an understanding. And that harkens back to L. Ron Hubbard being a prolific writer of science fiction and westerns, and for a penny a word back in the Pulp Fiction days. Anyway, again, no offense to individual Scientologists.
Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Let me start off by congratulating Sergeant Dan Loader, who received the Joseph Cornelius Family Foundation Police Officer of the Year, Samantha Schaefer, who received the Rotary Telecommunicator Award of the Year, and last but certainly not least, Officer Lauren Josie Filer, who shares my love for fashionable eyewear, who received the Rotary Public Safety Service Award. I also attended the Sheriff's Award ceremony, and I was very moved by the heroic actions of all those who were recipients, and I thank and congratulate all those award winners of all the law enforcement officers. I want to congratulate Dan Slaughter. Welcome to our family. Congratulations. I look forward to working with you. And last but not least, I attended the Sister City meeting last night and dinner, and I was excited to meet some of the children that will be visiting Nagano this summer. They are excited, and I'm very happy that we've started that whole process and look forward to going ourselves next year.
Thank you. Councilmember.
I just want to thank everybody for whether you were against or for this project moving forward, just giving me direction. I think it's great to have people that show up and give us your opinion, the public's opinion. So thank you very much for that. I mean, we do listen. We don't always agree, but we do listen, and it really helps shape our decisions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Great meeting tonight. I, too, would like to thank everyone that attended and anyone who gave us feedback. It was a very good, robust discussion tonight. I appreciate that, and I look forward to more of them. That's what we're all here for. Everybody's got different opinions. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we agree. Sometimes we disagree. But we do it professionally, and we move forward in the best interest of the city based on a consensus, and that's what we'll continue to do. I want to thank our rescue workers that were honored tonight. Outstanding work, saving a life, and risking their own, diving down multiple times into murky waters to pull someone out of a submerged vehicle. That's takes training, and it takes guts to do that. A lot of people couldn't do that, so congratulations to them again. Look forward to our next meeting. Thank you all for coming out. Good discussion tonight. Meeting is adjourned.